Welcome, friends. Tonight we journey back not to a battlefield or a crumbling empire or even a famous ruler, but to something far more ordinary, something quiet, daily, and unexpectedly intimate. This is the story of how people in ancient Rome kept themselves clean. In the great marble cities of the Roman Empire, past the noise of markets and the echo of sandals on stone, lay a world of simple rituals. Rituals of bathing, scraping, soaking, and scenting, not with soap or showers, but with olive oil, with warm water drawn from aqueducts, with shared sponges and steaming rooms where strangers sat shoulder to shoulder. Hygiene for the Romans was never just about dirt. It was about dignity, about discipline, about being seen. From the lowest laborer to the richest senator, the act of cleaning the body was woven into everyday life like thread into cloth. Tonight, you won't hear about Caesar or conquests. Instead, you'll walk slowly through tiled bathhouses filled with soft steam. You'll sit quietly by a public fountain as a woman rinses her hands. You'll visit the corners of private homes where clay jars held water for morning routines. You'll see how a society built around stone, power, and pride still paused every day for something as human as washing. This isn't a loud story. It doesn't hurry, it doesn't dazzle, but it lingers, like the scent of lavender oil on warm skin, or the sound of water trickling through ancient pipes. So settle in. Let your mind drift. The candles are flickering low, the streets of Rome are quiet now, and the past is ready to whisper its way back. This is what ancient Roman hygiene was really like. Boring history for sleep. Welcome to the journey. The Roman obsession with cleanliness. To truly comprehend the Roman world, one must begin not in the Forum with its clamor of politics, nor in the Colosseum with its echoes of blood and sand, but in the quiet, constant presence of water. For the Romans, water was more than a mere substance. It was a symbol, a tool, and a divine gift that they, through their peerless ingenuity, had learned to command. This mastery over water, channeled through the monumental arteries of their aqueducts, gave birth to a culture of cleanliness so profound and pervasive that it became inseparable from the very concept of being Roman. This was not hygiene as a sterile, private chore driven by a nascent understanding of germs. It was cura corporis, the care of the body, a practice elevated to the level of a civic virtue, a non-negotiable marker of social class, and a daily ritual that affirmed one's place within the ordered, civilized world. This obsession was, at its core, a philosophy of contrast. The Roman defined himself against the other, and no other was more vivid or viscerally offensive than the unwashed barbarian lurking at the fringes of the empire. Roman writers and historians speak with a unified voice of contempt for the perceived filth of the Germanic tribes, the Gauls, and the Huns. Tacitus notes the Germans' habit of letting their bodies remain caked in dirt, while Ammianus Marcellinus describes the Huns with palpable disgust, stating that they are so little concerned with neatness, they never washed their clothes or their bodies, and were glued to their horses as if part of the animal itself. To the Roman sensibility, this was not merely a different cultural practice, it was evidence of a chaotic, undisciplined, and fundamentally inferior state of being. The scent of stale sweat, rancid butter used in the hair, and unwashed wool was the scent of barbarism. The clean, perfumed, and well-groomed body, by contrast, was the scent of civilization, of order, of Rome itself. This olfactory and visual boundary was as real and as significant to them as any stone wall or fortified frontier. From this ideological foundation, cleanliness became a project of the state, an instrument of political power and social cohesion. The provision of water was perhaps the most tangible benefit an emperor could bestow upon his populace. The construction of a new aqueduct or a grand public bathhouse, a thermae, was an act of imperial benevolence on a scale almost impossible to imagine today. It was a declaration in stone and marble that the emperor cared for the health and happiness of his people. These were not mere public utilities, they were palaces for the masses. Emperors from Augustus, right-hand man Agrippa, to Trajan, Caracalla, and Diocletian engaged in a form of architectural one-upmanship, each seeking to build a bath complex more vast, more opulent, and more magnificent than the last. The baths of Caracalla, for instance, were not simply a place to get clean. They were a sprawling 33-acre complex of vaulted halls, manicured gardens, libraries for both Greek and Latin texts, art galleries filled with plundered masterpieces, gymnasiums and food stalls. For the cost of a single quadrans, the smallest Roman coin, a common artisan could enter a world of luxury that would otherwise be utterly inaccessible. He could walk on intricate mosaic floors, gaze up at gilded ceilings, and soak in the same heated waters as a senator or a wealthy equestrian. This act of state-sponsored hygiene was a brilliant piece of social engineering. It fostered a sense of shared Roman identity, providing a common experience that transcended the rigid class divisions of daily life. It was a far more profound and lasting form of bread and circuses, for while gladiatorial games offered fleeting distraction, the baths offered daily comfort, community, and a taste of the imperial good life. It was a constant physical reminder of the benefits of belonging to the Roman Empire. Yet for all this communal grandeur, cura corporis was also a deeply personal and hierarchical practice. The bathhouse may have been a great equalizer, but it was an imperfect one. The true nature of one's hygiene was a powerful indicator of class. A wealthy Roman would not arrive at the baths alone. He would be accompanied by an entourage of slaves. One slave, the capsarius, would be tasked solely with guarding his master's clothes in the changing room, a necessary precaution against the petty thieves who frequented such establishments. Others, the aleptae or unctores, were specialists in anointing the body, using fragrant, high-quality imported oils far superior to the cheap olive oil used by the common man. They would be skilled in massage and in the use of the strigil, the curved metal scraper used to remove the oil and dirt. This differentiation continued at home. While the plebeian living in a crowded insula relied on the public fountains and latrines, the patrician enjoyed the unparalleled luxury of a private bath suite within his domus. He had access to running water, a private toilet that flushed into the city's sewer system, and the time and resources to engage in elaborate grooming rituals. The quality of one's perfume, the complexity of a woman's hairstyle, the smoothness of a man's shaven chin, all these were subtle but clear signals of one's place in the social order. Cleanliness was a spectrum, and one's position on it was determined by wealth. Beyond the social and political, the Roman obsession with cleanliness was rooted in a philosophical and almost spiritual sense of order. The daily bath was a ritual of transformation. It was a structured process that moved the bather from the dust and sweat of the exercise yard through the cleansing fire of the hot rooms and into the clarifying shock of the cold plunge. This journey was seen as restorative, purging the body not just of dirt, but of fatigue and imbalance. It was a way to impose order on the self, to discipline the flesh, and to prepare the mind for the rigorous intellectual and civic duties of a Roman citizen. A clean body was believed to house a clearer mind. It is no coincidence that the great bathhouses contained libraries and lecture halls. The pursuit of physical purity was seen as complementary to the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom. The Roman day does not begin with the gentle persuasion of a sunrise, but with an infiltration of sound and a subtle change in the quality of the air. Long before the first rays of light crest the Quirennal Hill, the city of Rome is already churning itself awake. For Marcus, a respectable artisan who rents a modest two-room apartment, or synoculum, on the third floor of a sprawling insula in the Subura district, sleep is banished by the rumble of iron-wheeled service carts making their pre-dawn deliveries, a sound banned during the daylight hours, but relentless in the gray twilight before morning. The air, which had settled into a cool, dense stillness overnight, now begins to stir, carrying with it the first scents of the day, the sharp, inviting aroma of baking bread from the shop on the ground floor, mingling with the ever-present acrid undertone of smoke from countless kitchen fires and the faint, pervasive stench of the alleyways below. Marcus swings his legs off his straw-stuffed mattress, his feet meeting the cool, uneven wooden floorboards. There is no grandeur here. The room is small, functional, its plaster wall smudged with soot from the oil lamp that sputters on a small table. His wife is already moving in the dim light, her bare feet silent on the floor as she retrieves the earthenware basin and the heavy jug of water. This water is yesterday's news, hauled by Marcus himself from the nearest public fountain, the Lacus, a daily chore that bookends the Roman's life. He leans over the basin, the centerpiece of his morning ablutions. He plunges his hands into the water, and the cold is a welcome, clarifying shock. It's a physical jolt that severs the last ties to the dream world and anchors him firmly in the present. He splashes the water onto his face, rubbing his eyes, feeling the grit of the city that somehow settles everywhere, even in a closed room. He runs his wet hands over his neck and arms, a perfunctory wash that removes the sweat of the night, but does little more. There is no soap. That is not its purpose. This is a ritual of waking, not of deep cleansing. That will come later, in the heat and steam of the baths. Next, attention turns to the mouth, a part of the body whose social acceptability is paramount. Bad breath is a source of public shame, a topic of biting ridicule in the verses of the poets. Marcus takes a small sip of water from the jug, swishes it vigorously, and spits it into a separate, smaller bowl. Some days he might chew on a twig from a mastic tree, its resinous sap releasing a pine-like freshness that temporarily masks other odors. Today, he uses a tooth powder, a family preparation kept in a small clay pot. It is a simple, gritty mixture of powdered bone and crushed salt. He dips his index finger into the pot, collects a small amount of the coarse powder, and rubs it firmly against his teeth and gums. The sensation is abrasive. The taste is of salt and earth, and it feels more like a scouring than a gentle cleaning. He rinses again, the water now cloudy with the residue. He runs his tongue over his teeth. They feel smooth, polished. It is a satisfactory, if not entirely pleasant, sensation. Now, it is time to dress, to put on the uniform of his station. He stands as his wife helps him into his tunic, a simple knee-length garment of undyed, slightly coarse wool. It is the foundational piece of clothing for nearly every Roman man. He cinches it at the waist with a worn leather belt, from which he might later hang a small purse or a knife. But today, Marcus has business that requires him to present himself not just as a worker, but as a citizen. He must therefore don the toga. This is no simple task. The toga is a magnificent, cumbersome, and deeply symbolic garment, a heavy semicircle of wool nearly 18 feet long. It cannot be put on alone. His wife helps him, her movements practiced and efficient. She holds one end as he drapes it over his left shoulder, allowing a section to hang down in front. The rest of the vast fabric is passed around his back, under his right arm, and then thrown back over the left shoulder, the weight of it settling the folds into a series of carefully arranged drapes. The final garment is majestic but restrictive. It constrains his right arm, and its sheer weight is a constant, physical reminder of the gravity of Roman citizenship, its privileges, and its many obligations. Before leaving, he must eat. The morning meal, the ientaculum, is a Spartan affair. There is no ceremony. He breaks off a piece of coarse bread from a small loaf, dips it into a cup of wine watered down from yesterday's dinner, and eats it while standing. Perhaps there is a small wedge of hard cheese or a few olives to accompany it. The meal is purely functional, designed to quell the stomach and provide enough energy to get through the morning's work, the most productive part of the Roman day. The final act before descending into the city's chaos is the most private, yet it is inescapably part of the building's communal life. In the corner of the back room sits the lasanum, the chamber pot. Marcus relieves himself, adding to the pot that will later be emptied by his wife. Her task will be to carry the heavy container down 3 flights of winding, dark stairs to dump it in the cesspit in the courtyard, or, if she is in a hurry, to simply hurl its contents from the window into the alleyway below, shouting a customary warning to any unfortunate soul who might be passing. His personal rituals complete, Marcus gives his wife a brief nod, pulls on his leather sandals, and opens the door. He is immediately engulfed by the sensory overload of the insula stairwell, a vertical tunnel filled with the sounds of crying children, arguing neighbors, the smell of cooking, and the damp, musty odor of the building itself. He descends into the street, and the city hits him with full force. The noise is a physical presence, the shouting of merchants setting up their stalls, the braying of a donkey, the hammering from a nearby workshop. The air is a thick soup of smells: baking bread, roasting meats, fragrant spices from a vendor's stall, the scent of wine from a tavern, and overriding it all, the pungent, inescapable odors of human and animal waste that line the gutters. Marcus pulls his heavy toga tighter around him. He is washed, dressed, and fed, an island of personal order ready to be submerged in the chaotic, vibrant, and profoundly unclean river of Roman life. Olive oil, not soap. How Romans cleaned themselves. For the modern mind, the act of washing is inextricably linked with soap. We envision suds, lather, and the clean, stripped feeling that follows. To understand Roman hygiene is to first unlearn this fundamental assumption. While the Romans were aware of soap, sapo, a substance they encountered through contact with the Gauls, they viewed it with a degree of clinical detachment and even disdain for personal use. Pliny the Elder described it as an invention of the Gauls for giving a reddish tint to their hair, and also noted its use as a medicinal salve for treating sores. But for the daily full-body cleansing that was so central to their culture, they considered it a harsh, foreign concoction, suitable for laundering clothes or perhaps for barbarian hairstyling, but not for the skin of a civilized Roman. Their method was entirely different, revolving around 2 key elements that were quintessentially Mediterranean: olive oil and the strigil. The concept itself feels deeply counterintuitive. How does one get clean by deliberately covering oneself in oil? The logic lies in a simple chemical principle: like dissolves like. The daily grime on a Roman's body was a complex mixture. It included dust from the unpaved streets, sweat from exercise or labor, and the natural oils and dead skin cells produced by the body itself. Water alone is inefficient at removing these lipid-based substances. Oil, however, acts as a perfect solvent. When applied to the skin, it loosens and bonds with the dirt, sweat, and bodily secretions, lifting them from the pores and the surface of the skin in a way that a simple water rinse could not. It was, in essence, a primitive but highly effective form of what we might now call a cleansing balm, or a cold cream. The process began with the application. A Roman bather, typically having just finished exercise in the palaestra to open up the pores, would take a small flask, an ampulla, filled with oil. This was not the expensive first-press virgin olive oil reserved for the kitchens of the wealthy. It was a lower grade, less refined oil, sometimes infused with herbs or flowers for fragrance, but fundamentally a practical and inexpensive commodity. The bather would pour a generous amount into his palm and begin to methodically rub it all over his body: arms, legs, torso, and back. For those who could afford it, this task would be performed by a slave, an alipites or unctor, who was skilled in anointing and massage. The oil was worked deep into the skin, creating a slick, glistening sheen that trapped every particle of dirt. Once thoroughly oiled, the second, crucial stage of the process began: the removal. This was accomplished by a tool as essential to Roman bathing as the towel is to us today: the strigil. A strigil was a scraper, most commonly made of bronze, though iron and even silver examples exist. It consisted of a handle and a long curved blade, concave in shape. Holding the handle firmly, the bather or his slave would press the curved edge of the blade against the skin, and with long, firm, sweeping strokes scrape the oil off. The motion was always in one direction, pulling the tool towards the body to lift, not push, the grime. One can imagine the methodical scraping sound filling the air of the anointing rooms, a sound as common in the baths as the splash of water. As the strigil moved across the skin, it squeegeed off the layer of oil, and with it all the accumulated filth it had dissolved. This waste product, a thick, dark, and foul-smelling sludge known as gleos in Greek or strigmentum in Latin, would collect in the curved channel of the strigil's blade. At the end of each stroke, the bather would flick this grime onto the floor or into a special collecting pot. The process was repeated meticulously over the entire body, from the neck down to the ankles. It was a vigorous, exfoliating treatment, far more intense than a soft washcloth. The scraping action not only removed the dirt, but also stimulated circulation, removed layers of dead skin, and left the body feeling invigorated and tingling. The gleos itself was a peculiar byproduct of this hygienic ritual. While most of it was simply discarded, the collected grime scraped from famous athletes or gladiators was considered to have special properties. It was sometimes gathered and sold in small pots outside the arenas and baths. This celebrity sweat and oil mixture was believed to be a powerful medicinal ointment, used by women as a facial cream, or by others as a liniment to soothe aches and pains. It was a bizarre and telling intersection of hygiene, celebrity culture, and folk medicine. The strigil was a deeply personal item. Many citizens owned their own set, often consisting of several strigils of different sizes and a matching oil flask, all kept in a portable case called a strigiliaria. These kits ranged from the purely functional bronze sets of the common man to ornate silver ones carried by the elite, their handles decorated with mythological figures or intricate patterns. After use, the strigil had to be cleaned as well, wiped thoroughly, to be ready for the next day's ritual. The final step after the scraping was complete was a rinse. The bather, his skin now free of the oily mixture, would proceed to the bath's water circuits, often culminating in a plunge in the frigidarium, the cold pool. This final rinse with water would wash away any last residue of oil, while the cold would close the pores, leaving the skin feeling tight, smooth, and exceptionally clean. The result was not the dry, stripped feeling often left by harsh soaps, but a supple, moisturized, and glowing complexion. This oil and strigil method was the cornerstone of Roman cleansing for centuries. It was a system perfectly adapted to their environment, utilizing the abundant product of the olive tree. It was a multi-sensory experience involving texture, temperature, and scent. It was both a practical method of achieving physical cleanliness and a ritual that connected the Roman to his body through the vigorous, almost sculptural act of scraping. It reveals a culture that approached hygiene not as a simple matter of washing, but as a thoughtful and deeply ingrained process of purification and care. Bathing culture begins, the rise of public baths. In the rustic heart of the early Roman Republic, bathing was a modest and private affair. The rugged citizen farmer of that era, celebrated by conservative writers like Cato the Elder, practiced a form of hygiene that was functional and infrequent. The daily wash was typically limited to the arms and legs, a quick rinse to remove the soil and sweat of a day's labor in the fields. A full body immersion was a weekly ritual at best, often coinciding with the Nundine, the 9-day market cycle, and taking place in a simple washroom, lavatrina, within the family home. This was a world without grand public facilities, a world where cleanliness was a personal responsibility, not a public spectacle. But as Rome's legions marched outward, conquering the Hellenistic East and accumulating unimaginable wealth and new ideas, the city's relationship with water began a profound and irreversible transformation. Bathing was about to evolve from a simple chore into the central institution of Roman social life. The initial seeds of this evolution were the balneae. First appearing around the 2nd century BC, these were small, privately owned and operated bathhouses run for profit. They offered a practical service to the growing urban population, many of whom lived in crowded quarters without private washing facilities. These early balneae were a far cry from the palatial structures to come. They were often dark, cramped, and utilitarian, wedged into the dense urban fabric. Seneca, writing centuries later, described one such old-fashioned bath as a dark hole, lacking the large windows and grand vistas of the newer establishments. Yet these humble beginnings were revolutionary. They established the very concept of bathing as a public, communal activity, a service one could pay a small fee to enjoy. They separated the act of washing from the home and placed it firmly in the public square. The true turning point, the moment that elevated bathing from a mere convenience to an imperial obsession, can be traced to one man, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. A brilliant general, engineer, and the indispensable right-hand man of Emperor Augustus, Agrippa possessed a visionary understanding of urban infrastructure. He oversaw the repair of the city's sewers and the construction of new aqueducts, including the Aqua Vergo, which fed his masterpiece. In 25 BC, Agrippa used his immense personal fortune to build the first of the great imperial baths, the Thermae, on the Campus Martis. The baths of Agrippa were a statement of a new order. They were vast in scale, lavishly decorated with artworks, and surrounded by gardens. But Agrippa's most radical act was not architectural, it was political. Upon his death in 12 BC, he bequeathed his magnificent baths to the people of Rome, making them free for all citizens to use in perpetuity. This single act of generosity forever changed the public's expectations. It established a precedent that future emperors felt compelled to follow and exceed. The provision of grand, free, or nearly free bathing facilities became a crucial tool for securing popular favor, a permanent fixture in the imperial propaganda machine. Thus began the golden age of bath construction. Each successive emperor sought to leave his mark on the city by commissioning a new thermae, each more breathtaking than the last. Nero built his baths, followed by Titus, whose complex was famously inaugurated to provide relief after the eruption of Vesuvius. Then came the Emperor Trajan, whose baths, designed by the brilliant architect Apollodorus of Damascus, set a new standard for rational, symmetrical design and sheer size. Built over the ruins of Nero's Golden House, they were a marvel of light and space, incorporating libraries, lecture halls, and sprawling exercise yards into a cohesive, magnificent whole. Yet even these were surpassed. The baths of Caracalla, dedicated in 216 AD, were a monument to imperial megalomania. Covering over 33 acres, the complex could accommodate an estimated 1,600 bathers at a time. Its central block alone was a staggering architectural achievement, with a massive cross-vaulted ceiling in the central hall that soared over 100 feet high, an engineering feat that would not be rivaled until the construction of the great medieval cathedrals. The interior was a symphony of luxury. Floors paved with vibrant, pictorial mosaics, walls sheathed in multicolored imported marble, and hundreds of niches filled with masterpieces of sculpture, including famous works like the Farnese Bowl and the Farnese Hercules. Sunlight streamed through enormous arched windows made of glass, a costly material, illuminating the steam rising from the pools below. The architectural genius was not limited to the visible structure. Beneath the opulent halls lay a hidden, subterranean world of service tunnels and furnaces. The invention of the hypocaust heating system was the technological key that made these giant hothouses possible. A raised floor, supported by pillars of brick, pile, allowed hot air from massive wood-burning furnaces to circulate underneath, heating the marble floors of the warm and hot rooms to a comfortable temperature. The hot air was also channeled up through hollow tiles within the walls, enveloping the rooms in a blanket of radiant heat. This sophisticated system of central heating was what allowed for the carefully controlled thermal journey that was the essence of the Roman bathing experience. The final and most colossal of these structures were the baths of Diocletian, inaugurated at the beginning of the 4th century AD. They were the largest of all, sprawling across the city and capable of holding perhaps 3,000 bathers simultaneously. Their scale was so immense that their ruins were later able to be converted into multiple churches, including Michelangelo's Santa Maria degli Angeli e di Martiri, which preserves the original soaring dimensions of the Frigidarium, monasteries, and warehouses. The rise of the public bath from the humble balnia to the imperial thermae is a story of architectural ambition, technological innovation, and political strategy. These were not just bathhouses, they were expressions of the power and stability of the empire. They were civic centers, cultural institutions, and social melting pots. They transformed the simple act of washing into a complex and cherished ritual that stood at the very heart of Roman identity for centuries.
A visit to the thermae, bathing step by step. Imagine it is the 8th hour, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the time when the workday for most Romans is winding down, and the city's collective energy begins to shift towards leisure. You join the stream of citizens, from senators in their litters to humble craftsmen on foot, all converging on the monumental entrance of a grand imperial thermae. Passing beneath a towering archway, the cacophony of the urban streets, the rattling carts, the shouting vendors, the endless hum of a million lives begins to recede, replaced by a different kind of human soundscape. The excited chatter of friends, the splash of water, the dull thud of a ball being struck in a courtyard. You pay your negligible entrance fee, a single bronze quadrans, to the attendant and step across the threshold, entering a world meticulously designed for the care of the body. Your first destination is the apoditerium, the changing room. This is the grand vestibule of the bathing ritual, a spacious, often elaborately decorated hall. The walls might be adorned with frescoes of marine life or mythological scenes, and the ceiling might be high and vaulted. Stone or marble benches line the walls, and above them are a series of deep open niches like large cubbyholes for storing your clothes. There are no locks, no secure lockers. The safety of your belongings relies on the general honesty of the public, or, more reliably, on the watchful eye of a slave you have either brought with you or hired for the purpose. The cupsurius, the cloak watcher, is a common figure in the baths, and Roman literature is filled with tales of their occasional dishonesty. Here, in the bustling, humid air of the apoditerium, you strip off the garments of your public life, the heavy, formal toga, if you are a citizen of status, the practical tunic, the leather sandals. You are reduced to a simple loincloth, a subligaculum, or, as was common for many men, to complete nudity. In this moment of undressing, the rigid social hierarchies of the outside world become momentarily blurred. From the changing room, you do not proceed directly to the water. The Roman bathing ritual began with heat and sweat generated through exercise. You walk out into the palaestra, a vast open-air gymnasium that often formed the heart of the bath complex. The sun beats down on the sand-covered ground, which is surrounded by a covered colonnade to provide shade for onlookers. The air is alive with activity. In one corner, a pair of muscular men, their bodies glistening with oil, are engaged in a wrestling match, their grunts and the slap of flesh on flesh audible. Nearby, a group of younger men are playing Trigon, a fast-paced ball game involving 3 players in a triangle, tossing multiple hard balls between them. Others are lifting rudimentary weights made of stone or bronze, practicing fencing with wooden swords, or simply going for a brisk run around the perimeter of the courtyard. You join in a less strenuous activity, perhaps some light calisthenics or a gentle ball game, enough to work up a healthy sweat, to open the pores, and to prepare your body for the cleansing process to come. Covered in a fine layer of dust and sweat, you now move to an adjoining room to be anointed. Here you take your personal flask of oil and begin the process of slathering it over your body. The air is thick with the nutty scent of olive oil. Once thoroughly coated, the scraping begins. You take your strigil and start the vigorous, methodical process of removing the oil, which now holds the grime from your exercise in suspension. With each stroke, a dark line of strigmentum is drawn off the skin and flicked to the floor. It is an invigorating, exfoliating massage that leaves your skin tingling and alive. Now, truly ready, you begin the thermal journey through the core of the bathhouse. Your first stop is the tepidarium, the warm room. You push through a heavy door and are immediately enveloped in a gentle, humid warmth. This room is a crucial transition zone, designed to allow your body to acclimatize to the heat. The temperature is pleasant, not overwhelming, heated by the hypocaust system, circulating warm air beneath the floor. You might lounge here for some time on a marble bench, the warmth seeping into your muscles, your body slowly adjusting to the heat. The tepidarium is often the most ornate room, a place for conversation and relaxation before the more intense experiences to come. Next, you proceed to the caldidarium, the hot room. The moment you enter, the change is dramatic. The heat is a physical presence, a thick, steamy blanket that immediately beads your skin with sweat. The air is saturated with vapor rising from the hot water pools at either end of the long rectangular hall. The floor, directly above the most intense part of the furnace, is almost too hot to stand on, and you wear protective wooden sandals, sculponia, to avoid burning your feet. Here, in the intense cleansing heat, you sweat profusely. This is the climax of the purgative process. You might lower yourself into one of the pools of very hot water for a deep soak, or use a scoop to pour the water over your head and shoulders. In the center of the room, under a high domed ceiling with a circular opening, the oculus, stands the labrum, a large, shallow basin of cool water. You splash your face and chest, a momentary, welcome relief from the oppressive heat. Finally, after enduring the fiery embrace of the caldidarium for as long as you can stand, you make your way to the final stage of the ritual. Your body is flushed red and steaming. You walk through the tepidarium again, and then enter the frigidarium, the cold room. This is often the largest and most architecturally grand space in the entire complex, its scale a testament to the importance of this final step. In the center is a large, deep, swimming pool-sized basin of unheated, bracingly cold water. Without hesitation, you descend the steps and plunge in. The shock is instantaneous and breathtaking. The icy water closes your pores, tightens your skin, and washes away the last traces of sweat and oil. The sensation is one of pure exhilaration, a jolt that awakens the senses and leaves you feeling utterly renewed. You emerge from the cold water reborn, your skin glowing, your body invigorated, and your mind clear. The physical act of bathing is complete. You are profoundly and completely clean, ready now for the social pleasures the bathhouse still has to offer.
The journey through the heated chambers and cold pools of the Roman thermae was, for all its ritualistic importance, merely the overture. To become physically clean was the entry ticket, but the main performance was the rich, complex, and unending social drama that played out within the bathhouse walls. Once the body was cleansed and invigorated, the Roman citizen was not expected to hastily dress and depart. Instead, he was primed for the true purpose of the institution: community. The thermae were the pulsating, vibrant heart of Roman urban life, a city in miniature where the full spectrum of human activity, from the loftiest intellectual pursuits to the most mundane gossip and illicit vices, unfolded daily under one colossal, vaulted roof. After emerging reborn from the bracing waters of the Frigidarium, a Roman's afternoon of leisure had just begun. He might wrap himself in a linen towel and wander towards the quieter, more contemplative spaces that were an integral part of the grander imperial baths. The great complexes of Trajan, Caracalla, and Diocletian all contained magnificent libraries, typically a pair of halls flanking the central axis, one dedicated to Greek texts and the other to Latin. Here, in sunlit rooms lined with niches holding countless scrolls, the air was calm and studious. A scholar could spend hours researching, a student could work on his rhetoric, or a poet could find a quiet corner to compose his verses. These were not just repositories of knowledge, they were active intellectual centers. One might encounter a philosopher engaging a group of young men in a spirited debate on the nature of virtue, or a historian reading aloud from his latest work to a captive and very clean audience. The Roman ideal of mens sana in corpore sano, a sound mind and a sound body, was given physical form in the thermae. The care of the body was not an end in itself, but a preparation for the cultivation of the mind. For those less inclined towards scholarly pursuits, a galaxy of other diversions beckoned. The bathhouse was, above all, a place to meet people. It was the default location for friends to rendezvous, the ancient equivalent of the modern cafe, pub, and community center rolled into one. Businessmen would conduct meetings and strike deals while lounging on the warm marble benches of the tepidarium, their negotiations punctuated by the distant shouts from the exercise yard. Politicians would stroll through the gardens and colonnades, greeting constituents, gauging the public mood, and discreetly forging alliances. The baths were a critical node in the city's information network, the place where news and rumors spread with the speed of an unchecked fire. Gossip, from the latest imperial scandal to neighborhood intrigues, was the common currency of conversation. The sounds of the bathhouse, so vividly lamented by the philosopher Seneca, who had the misfortune of living in an apartment directly above one, attest to its dynamic, noisy, and boisterous character. He complained of the constant auditory assault, the grunting and panting of men lifting weights, the sharp slapping sound of the masseur's eyes on oiled skin, the incessant shouting of the ball game players, the loud, arresting calls of the food vendors, and the obstreperous fellow who delights in the sound of his own voice in the bath. Seneca's irritation is our most valuable evidence. The baths were loud because they were alive, teeming with an energy that was fundamentally social and interactive. This social world included a wide array of services and commercial activities. Barbers, tonsores, set up shop in the baths, offering shaves and haircuts. Depilators plied their trade, their customers' sharp yelps occasionally piercing the general din. Masseurs offered their services, ranging from a simple oiling to deep therapeutic massages. And of course, there was food and drink. Vendors circulated through the complex, selling everything from sausages and pastries to wine and sweetened drinks. The bathhouse was a place to indulge all the senses. One could enjoy a snack, a drink, and a good conversation with friends, all within the same sprawling complex. Inevitably, where crowds gathered, vice followed. Gambling, while officially frowned upon and often illegal, was rampant in the more secluded corners of the baths. Groups of men would huddle together, playing games of dice for money, their hushed but intense arguments a common feature of the bathhouse soundscape. Prostitution was an open secret. The baths, with their atmosphere of leisure, nudity, and indulgence, were a natural place for prostitutes of both sexes to find clients. They were a regular and accepted part of the bathhouse ecosystem, another thread in its complex social tapestry. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the baths as a social hub was their role as a social leveler. While the very wealthy could flaunt their status with their slave entourages and expensive perfumes, and the destitute might be excluded by even the smallest fee, the space itself was fundamentally democratic. Within the hot rooms and swimming pools, the rigid hierarchies of Roman society became more fluid. A baker, a stonemason, and a senator might find themselves sweating side by side in the caldarium, their bodies stripped of the togas and tunics that defined their rank. They might listen to the same public reading, admire the same statues, or even find themselves drawn into the same debate. For a few hours each afternoon, the shared experience of bathing and relaxing created a sense of civic community that was unique in the ancient world. It reinforced a collective Roman identity, reminding every citizen that, regardless of his wealth, he was a participant in the grand, shared culture of Rome.
The business of bathing. Who paid, who worked? The effortless luxury of the Roman baths, the seemingly endless supply of hot water, the gleaming marble, the sheer scale of the operation, was the result of a relentless and largely invisible engine of commerce, labor, and logistics. Behind the serene facade of public leisure lay a complex business model and a vast hierarchical workforce that toiled in conditions ranging from skilled artisanship to the most brutal forms of servitude. The business of bathing was a massive industry, a public-private partnership that required immense capital, constant maintenance, and a staggering amount of human effort to keep the waters flowing and the furnaces burning. At the apex of this economic pyramid stood the state, personified by the emperor. The great imperial thermae were constructed using public funds, or the emperor's personal wealth, as monumental gifts to the people. This initial capital investment was astronomical, a project of propaganda as much as public health. However, the state rarely involved itself in the messy, day-to-day operations. Instead, it leased the management of these vast facilities to private citizens or consortiums. A wealthy entrepreneur, known as a conductor, would bid for the contract to run a bathhouse for a set period, typically 5 years. He would pay a fixed rent to the state treasury, and in return would be entitled to all the revenue generated by the baths. The conductor's goal, naturally, was to cover his rent and operating costs and turn a handsome profit. The primary and most consistent stream of revenue was the entrance fee, the balneaticum. This fee was kept deliberately low to ensure accessibility for the masses. For men, it was usually 1 quadranus, the smallest denomination of Roman coin, equivalent to 1/16 of a sestertius. For comparison, a loaf of bread might cost 2 quadrantes. The fee for women was often double that of men, a reflection of the common Roman belief that the women's sections were more expensive to maintain, or simply a form of gender-based price discrimination. Children were typically admitted free of charge until they reached puberty. While the individual fee was minuscule, the sheer volume of daily visitors to a major complex like the Baths of Caracalla, thousands upon thousands, meant that the income from entrance fees alone was substantial. A conductor could supplement this income through other means. He could rent out space within the complex to a host of independent vendors, the food sellers, the wine merchants, the barbers, the masseurs. These ancillary businesses paid the conductor for the privilege of operating within his concession, adding another layer to the bath's internal economy. However, the conductor's profits were not always guaranteed. A powerful politician or the emperor himself could, as an act of public generosity, urgetism, declare the baths free for a specific period, a day, a month, or even a year, to celebrate a military victory or a festival. In these instances, this patron would reimburse the conductor for the lost revenue from entrance fees, an arrangement that was both a civic virtue and a calculated political move. Beneath the conductor and the bustling world of commerce was the immense and largely enslaved workforce that made the entire enterprise possible. The most critical and hellish job was that of the fornicator, the furnace stoker.
Deep in the subterranean levels of the baths, in a dark, labyrinthian world of service tunnels, these men, almost exclusively slaves, labored in blistering heat and choking smoke. Their sole task was to feed the massive furnaces, fornaces, that powered the hypocast system. They shoveled enormous quantities of wood into the roaring fires day and night without pause. The consumption of firewood was prodigious, leading to significant deforestation in the regions surrounding Rome. The life of a fornicator was brutal and short, a living sacrifice to the comfort of the thousands of bathers in the opulent halls directly above their heads. Upstairs, in the public areas, another army of workers, a mix of slaves and freeborn poor, attended to the needs of the clientele. At the entrance was the balneator, the fee collector. In the apoditerium, the capsari, clothes watchers, often young slave boys, guarded the piles of clothing, their reputation for pilfering being a running joke in Roman literature. A bather could hire the services of an unctor to be oiled and a frictor to be strigiled and rubbed down. These were often skilled slaves belonging to the bathhouse management or independent operators who paid for a spot. The floors had to be constantly swabbed, the pools skimmed of debris, and the latrines kept clean, all tasks that fell to the lowest rung of the bathhouse staff. The logistics of supplying a bathhouse were as complex as its operation. It required a constant, guaranteed supply of water from the aqueducts. It required a supply chain for the vast quantities of wood needed for the furnaces, transported to the city on barges down the Tiber or on carts along the Roman roads. It needed a steady supply of oil for anointing and for the lamps that would illuminate the complex as evening fell. The business of bathing was a microcosm of the Roman economy itself, dependent on long-distance trade, sophisticated logistics, and a foundation of slave labor. It was a machine of pleasure and hygiene, fueled by money, wood, and the relentless, often unrecorded toil of thousands.
The waterworks, aqueducts, and plumbing. The Roman obsession with cleanliness, the very existence of the monumental ferme and the splashing public fountains rested upon a single foundational technology: the aqueduct. These were not merely conduits for water, they were the arteries of the empire, grand and enduring monuments to a civilization that possessed the audacity to bend nature to its will. To trace the path of an aqueduct is to witness a masterpiece of applied science, a testament to the Roman genius for practical engineering, meticulous surveying, and colossal construction. The story of Roman hygiene does not begin in the bath, but miles away, in the quiet hills where a spring of pure water bubbled from the earth and a Roman engineer first began his calculations. The process began with an almost sacred act of observation. Roman water surveyors, the aqualegis, were masters of their craft. They would spend months or even years in the countryside, identifying the best water sources, clear, clean, and copious springs, preferably high in the mountains, to provide a natural starting elevation. They assessed the water's purity not through chemistry, but through observation, its clarity, its taste, and the health of the local people who drank from it. Once a source was chosen, the real work began. Using surprisingly simple instruments, they plotted a course for the water that could stretch for over 50 miles. The primary tool was the korobates, a long wooden plank with legs, a channel for water on top to act as a level, and plumb lines for calibration. With this and other tools, like the groma for laying out right angles, they could calculate a precise, continuous, and very gentle downward gradient. This gradient was the secret to the entire system. The Romans did not have mechanical pumps capable of moving such vast quantities of water. They relied on the unceasing and free power of gravity alone. The ideal gradient was minuscule, often just a few feet of drop for every mile of travel, enough to keep the water moving steadily without allowing it to rush and damage the structure.
While our popular imagination pictures the aqueducts as a majestic series of towering arches marching across the landscape, this iconic image represents only a fraction of their total length. For the majority of their journey, the aqueducts were hidden from view. They were subterranean channels, a meter or two wide, dug into the ground and lined with stone. This design was a pragmatic choice. Running the channel underground protected the water from contamination by dirt and animals, kept it cool and prevented evaporation in the summer sun, and hid it from enemies in times of war. It also minimized the disruption to valuable agricultural land. The construction of these tunnels was a monumental undertaking, requiring legions of laborers, often soldiers from the Roman army, who possessed the discipline and engineering skill for such tasks, supplemented by slave labor. They quarried stone, mixed a special waterproof cement called opus signinum, which included crushed terracotta pottery for its hydraulic properties, and painstakingly constructed the watertight channel. The magnificent, multi-tiered arched bridges that we so admire were reserved for moments when the aqueduct had to cross a river or a deep valley. They were solutions to topographical problems, and their beauty was a byproduct of their function. Structures like the Pont du Gard in southern France or the Aqueduct of Segovia in Spain are breathtaking examples of the Romans' mastery of the arch, an architectural form that allowed them to span vast distances while supporting immense weight with surprising structural elegance. These bridges were built to last an eternity. Their stones often cut so precisely that they required no mortar to hold them together. As the aqueduct neared the city of Rome, its precious cargo was delivered to a primary distribution reservoir, a large enclosed tank called a castellum aquae. The Aqua Marcia, for example, terminated at a castellum near the Viminal Gate. From this point, the water, now under the control of the Curator Aquarum, the imperial water commissioner, was divided. A complex system of secondary channels and pipes branched out to serve the city's needs. The main pipes were often large, square conduits made of lead or terracotta, which then fed smaller, circular lead pipes or fistulae. These lead pipes were a technological marvel in themselves, made by rolling a flat sheet of lead around a wooden core and soldering the seam shut. They were often stamped with information about their manufacturer or the property owner they supplied, giving us invaluable insight into the administration of the water system. This intricate network of plumbing delivered an astonishing volume of water. 11 major aqueducts supplied the city of Rome with an estimated 1 million cubic meters, over 260 million gallons of water every single day. This water fed the hundreds of public fountains, filled the massive pools of the Thermae, flushed the public latrines, and, for a hefty fee, was piped directly into the homes of the super-rich. It was this abundance, this engineered surplus of clean water, that made the entire Roman culture of hygiene possible. The aqueducts were the silent, steadfast enablers of the Roman way of life. A slow, constant, life-giving river of stone that flowed for centuries, a quiet and awe-inspiring monument to the power of human ingenuity.
Latrines and the sponge on a stick. We must now descend from the awe-inspiring heights of the aqueducts to the far more intimate and unsettling realm of the Roman public toilet. The Roman forica, or public latrine, stands as one of the great paradoxes of their civilization. It was, on one hand, a testament to their advanced understanding of hydraulic engineering and their commitment to public sanitation. On the other, it was a place of shocking communal intimacy and questionable hygiene that reveals the profound gulf between their world and our own, particularly in the understanding of disease. To step into a Roman latrine is to confront a set of cultural norms about privacy and cleanliness that are almost alien to the modern psyche. Imagine a large, airy, and often surprisingly well-appointed room. It is not a hidden, malodorous closet, but a significant public space, sometimes attached to a bathhouse or located near a busy forum. The architecture could be quite pleasant, with high ceilings to aid ventilation, decorative mosaics on the floor depicting dolphins or other marine creatures, and perhaps frescoes on the walls. In the center of the room, there might be a small fountain or a sculpture. The defining feature, however, is the arrangement of the seating. Running along 2 or 3 of the walls is a long, continuous bench, usually crafted from cool marble or smooth stone. This bench is perforated with a series of keyhole-shaped openings, spaced just far enough apart to accommodate a seated adult. There are no stalls, no partitions, no doors, nothing to shield the person from their neighbors. Up to 20 or 30 people, men in one facility and women in a separate one, would sit side by side, conducting their most private bodily functions in a thoroughly public setting. The genius of the system and the source of the Roman reputation for sanitation was the use of water. Directly beneath the seating benches, a channel was cut into the floor. A constant stream of water, diverted from a nearby aqueduct or the outflow from a bathhouse, flowed through this channel, carrying the waste away from the building and into the city's main sewer lines. This continuous flow was a remarkable innovation, preventing the buildup of filth and odor that would have made such a facility unbearable. It was an elegant engineering solution to the problem of waste removal in a densely populated city. However, the Roman understanding of hygiene was limited to what was visible. The flowing water washed the waste away, so in their minds the place was clean. This is where we encounter the most infamous and jarring detail of the Roman latrine, the method of personal cleansing. At the feet of the seated patrons, another, smaller channel of clean water often flowed in a shallow gutter. Lying in this channel, or perhaps in a nearby bucket filled with salt water or vinegar, was the communal cleaning implement, the xylospongium. This was quite simply a natural sea sponge attached to the end of a wooden stick. After defecating, a Roman would reach down, pick up the shared sponge stick, use it to clean themselves, rinse it off in the channel of water at their feet, and then place it back for the next person to use. From a modern microbiological perspective, this practice is horrifying. The xylospongium would have been a 5-star hotel for bacteria, viruses, and the eggs of intestinal parasites. The simple rinsing in cold water would have done little to sterilize it. This single, shared implement was an incredibly efficient vector for the transmission of diseases like cholera, typhoid, dysentery, and whipworm. Archaeological studies of waste deposits from Roman sewers have confirmed the widespread presence of these parasites. The Romans, lacking any concept of germ theory, saw only that the sponge had been visibly rinsed and was therefore clean. Their impressive large-scale sanitation system was undermined by a failure to understand small-scale contamination. Despite this shocking, to us, lack of hygiene, the latrine was not a place of shame or haste. On the contrary, it was a recognized social space. The side-by-side seating arrangement encouraged conversation. Friends might arrange to meet there. Business could be discussed, jokes exchanged, and news passed along. The poet Martial famously jokes about a man named Vacera who constantly invites him to dinner but never serves him, and Martial threatens to repay the favor by inviting Vacera to the latrine to watch him relieve himself. The anecdote, while coarse, highlights the casual communal nature of the space. It was an extension of the forum and the bathhouse, another venue for the daily performance of Roman social life. Some latrines were even sponsored by wealthy individuals, their names inscribed in the entryway, further cementing the latrine status as a valued public institution. The experience of using a Roman latrine was thus a study of contrasts. It was a place of sophisticated water engineering and primitive bacteriological understanding. It was a space of public function and social interaction, yet one that accommodated the most private of human needs. It was, in its own way, as representative of the Roman character as the Colosseum, practical, communal, impressively engineered, and, to our modern eyes, brutally and dangerously unhygienic.
Away from the noisy, communal world of the public foracae, a different story of sanitation and hygiene unfolded behind the closed doors of Roman residences. Here, in the private sphere, the convenience, technology, and cleanliness of one's toilet facilities were not a public utility, but a direct and unambiguous expression of personal wealth and social status. The gulf between the daily reality of a poor plebeian in a high-rise apartment and a wealthy senator in his sprawling villa was nowhere more apparent than in how they answered the most basic calls of nature. The story of the private Roman toilet is a tale of two cities, one of makeshift solutions and the other of astonishing water-fed luxury. Let us first enter the world of the vast majority of Rome's inhabitants, the insula. These were the massive, multi-story apartment blocks that housed the city's working class. Often hastily and cheaply constructed, they were densely packed and notoriously lacking in amenities. For a family living on the upper floors of an insula, the concept of a private flushing toilet was an impossible dream. There was no plumbing that reached these heights. The solution was the lasanum, or matella, the humble chamber pot. These earthenware, or more rarely bronze vessels, were the universal toilet for the common Roman family. They would be kept in the corner of the small, crowded living quarters, their use a matter of course in the daily rhythm of life. The critical issue was not the use of the pot, but its disposal. Once full, the contents had to be emptied. The most direct, though illegal method, was to simply toss the waste out of a window and into the street or alley below. The practice was so common that Roman law specifically addressed it. The praetor's edict contained provisions allowing a person who is struck and injured or had their property damaged by something poured or thrown out, dejectum vel effusum, to sue the resident of the apartment from which it came. The customary shout of garde l'eau, meaning watch out for the water, may well have its origins in the hazardous streets of ancient Rome. For the more conscientious or law-abiding resident, emptying the pot meant a long, arduous trip down several flights of dark, rickety stairs to dump the contents into a large dolium, storage jar, at the base of the building or into the nearest cesspit. This foul-smelling pit served multiple apartment blocks and was only emptied periodically by stercorari, waste collectors who would sell the nutrient-rich human manure to farmers as fertilizer. Now, let us leave the teeming insula and cross the city to a patrician's domus, a luxurious single-family home built around a central courtyard. Here, the experience of sanitation was transformed into one of quiet convenience and refined privacy. The wealthiest homes would boast one or more private latrines, latrinae, often discreetly located near the kitchen, a practical placement that allowed both rooms to share a common water supply and drainage line. This was not the grand multi-seat arrangement of the public toilets, but an intimate single-seat affair. The seat itself might be a comfortable wooden plank or a finely carved slab of marble, built over a channel. The true luxury, the feature that separated the rich from the poor, was the connection to running water. A dedicated lead pipe, a fistula, would branch off from the main aqueduct line that supplied the domus, a privilege for which the owner paid a hefty tax to the state. This pipe would direct a small but continuous stream of water to flow into the channel beneath the toilet seat. This constant flow immediately washed waste out of the house, eliminating odor and the need for manual disposal. This was in effect a private flushing toilet, a pinnacle of domestic technology in the ancient world. The waste from this private toilet would be carried through a drain into one of two destinations. In many homes, it would flow into a sealed cesspit built beneath the house, which would need to be cleaned out by slaves every few years, a repulsive but necessary task. In the most advanced and well-situated homes, however, the private drain connected directly to the public sewer system that ran under the street. This was the ultimate inconvenience, seamlessly integrating the private home into the city's magnificent sanitation grid. Within this private space, the hygienic tools were also private. The xylospongium, the sponge on a stick, was not a shared object but a personal item, used only by the family. The room itself, while small, might be comfortably appointed, with plastered walls, a small mosaic on the floor, and a niche for an oil lamp. It was a space of solitude and civility, a world away from the chamber pot and the cesspit. This stark contrast between the Lasanum of the insula and the flushing latrina of the domus is a powerful illustration of the deep and unbridgeable chasm that separated the lived experiences of the Roman social classes. In ancient Rome, even the most fundamental human functions were stratified by wealth.
Dealing with waste, the Cloaca Maxima. Once the water of the aqueducts had served its myriad purposes, flushing a patrician's private toilet, rinsing the grime from a bather's skin, scouring grease from a toga in a fuller's workshop, it became something else. It transformed from a symbol of life and purity into a carrier of filth and effluence. The final, unseen chapter of Roman hygiene is the story of this water's journey, a gritty and subterranean epic that follows the city's waste through a dark, engineered underworld. The hero of the story is the Cloaca Maxima, the greatest sewer, a monumental and ancient piece of infrastructure that was the backbone of Roman sanitation and a key reason why a city of 1 million people did not drown in its own refuse. The origins of the Cloaca Maxima predate the grandeur of the empire and even the Republic. Its story begins in the 6th century BC, during the legendary era of Rome's kings. At this time, the area that would become the celebrated Roman Forum was a marshy, inhospitable swamp, fed by streams trickling down from the surrounding Palatine, Capitoline, and Esquiline hills. The primary purpose of the original cloaca was not sanitation, but land reclamation. It was conceived as a great open-air canal lined with stone designed to drain this waterlogged valley, channel the streams, and carry the water away to the nearby Tiber River. This act of civil engineering was foundational. By taming the marsh, Rome's early rulers created the usable public space that would become the political and social heart of their burgeoning city for the next 1,000 years. As Rome grew, so did the cloaca. Over centuries of continuous urban development, the open canal was gradually built over. Buildings and streets expanded over its path, and a vaulted stone ceiling was constructed, transforming the open channel into a massive underground tunnel. It became the main trunk line of an increasingly complex sewer network that spread like the roots of a great tree beneath the city streets. Smaller collector sewers, like veins, fed into this great artery. These branch lines collected the overflow from public fountains, the wastewater from the immense bath complexes, the runoff from the streets, and the effluent from the public and private latrines of those fortunate enough to be connected to the system. To venture into the Cloaca Maxima, a feat occasionally undertaken by Roman maintenance workers and modern archaeologists alike, is to be overwhelmed by its scale. In its main sections, it is a cavernous tunnel large enough, as Pliny the Elder marveled, for a wagon loaded with hay to pass through. Its stone block construction is a testament to the durability of Roman engineering, having withstood centuries of pressure from the city above and the relentless flow of water within. The system was brilliantly designed to be largely self-cleaning. The constant, massive outflow from the aqueducts, after being used in the baths and fountains, provided a powerful and perpetual current that flushed the system, keeping the waste moving and preventing the catastrophic blockages that could have otherwise occurred. Rainstorms also provided a powerful periodic scouring effect, as immense volumes of stormwater would pour into the system through drains in the streets, washing away accumulated sediment. The route of the Cloaca Maxima traces a path through the very heart of ancient Rome. It flows directly beneath the Forum, a silent, hidden river of filth running underneath the feet of senators debating and merchants haggling. From there, it continues its journey through the low-lying areas of the city, finally reaching its outfall point where it discharges its contents directly and without treatment into the Tiber River. This was the system's primary and most significant flaw from a modern perspective. While it effectively removed waste from the immediate urban environment, it turned the Tiber, downstream from the city, into a heavily polluted waterway. The river that was the city's lifeline and a symbol of its origins became its dumping ground, creating significant health risks for any communities or individuals who relied on the river for water further south.
Maintenance of this vast and vital system was a dangerous and repulsive job that fell to a special class of public slaves. When blockages did occur, these workers had to be sent down into the Stygian darkness of the sewers to clear the obstruction. Armed with little more than lamps and basic tools, they navigated the foul-smelling, rat-infested tunnels in a task that was as hazardous as it was essential. The state recognized the importance of this work, and under Augustus, a dedicated commission was established to oversee the maintenance of the city's water and sewer systems. The Cloaca Maxima was more than a sewer. It was the hidden counterpart to the glorious aqueducts. One brought life-giving water in, the other took life-threatening waste away. It was a gritty, unglamorous, and largely invisible system, yet it was absolutely indispensable. It allowed for a level of population density that would have been impossible without it, and it represented a sophisticated, large-scale approach to public health that was unparalleled in the ancient world. It was a pragmatic and enduring solution to the fundamental problem of any great city: how to deal with the waste it inevitably produces.
For the Roman state, hygiene was more than a matter of comfort or civic pride. It was an instrument of power. Nowhere was this more evident than in the disciplined world of the Roman military. On the vast and often hostile frontiers of the empire, from the damp forests of Germania to the arid deserts of Syria, the health and combat readiness of the legions were paramount. A Roman general understood that an army could be defeated far more easily by dysentery, typhoid, or typhus than by an enemy's sword. Consequently, Roman military practice incorporated a strict, systematic, and highly practical approach to hygiene and sanitation. This was not about luxury, it was about preserving the fighting strength of the legion, the most valuable asset of the empire. This disciplined approach began with the very layout of the military camp, the castrum. Whether it was a temporary marching camp constructed for a single night or a permanent legionary fortress built to stand for centuries, every Roman camp followed a standardized, rational grid plan. This obsession with order extended to its sanitary arrangements. The location of the latrines was not an afterthought. It was a strategic decision. They were always situated on the periphery of the camp, on the downward slope of the terrain, and, crucially, downstream from the camp's water source. These were not simply hastily dug pits. In permanent fortresses, the latrines were sophisticated, multi-seat structures, often long stone or wooden benches with channels underneath. Whenever possible, a stream was diverted to flow continuously through these channels, creating a constantly flushing system that carried waste away from the camp, a microcosm of the great urban sewers. This careful separation of waste from living quarters and water supplies was a fundamental principle of Roman military public health. Personal cleanliness for the individual soldier was also a matter of routine and discipline. While on the march, in temperate climates, soldiers would bathe in rivers and lakes whenever the opportunity arose. But in the permanent fortresses that guarded the empire's frontiers, the army built its own dedicated bathhouses. These military balnei were not the opulent marble-clad palaces of the capital. They were sturdy, functional buildings designed for efficiency and durability. However, they contained all the essential elements of the Roman bathing ritual: a changing room, apoditerium; a warm room, tepidarium; a hot room, caldidarium; and a cold plunge, frigidarium, all heated by the same type of hypocaust system found in the city. These military baths served a dual purpose. Firstly, they were vital for morale. For a soldier serving a 25-year term far from home in a harsh and unforgiving environment, the daily bath was a connection to the civilized Roman way of life. It was a place to wash away the grime of patrols and drills, to ease sore muscles in the heated water, and to socialize with his comrades in a relaxed setting.
but the primary purpose was medical. Regular, thorough cleansing helped to prevent skin diseases, infections, and infestations of lice and fleas, which could spread debilitating diseases like trench fever or typhus through the close-packed barracks. The strigil and oil were as much a part of a soldier's kit as his sword and shield. Beyond bathing and sanitation, the Roman army pioneered the concept of institutionalized military medicine. Every major legionary fortress included a valetudinarium, a dedicated hospital, another Roman innovation. These were large, methodically designed buildings, often arranged as a series of individual wards or small rooms opening onto a central corridor or courtyard. This design maximized light and air circulation, a feature that Roman architects like Vitruvius believed was crucial for promoting healing by dispersing bad air or miasma. The hospital was staffed by trained military doctors and orderlies who provided a level of care that was unheard of in other ancient armies. Roman military surgeons were particularly skilled, their knowledge honed by the grim realities of the battlefield. They understood the importance of cleanliness in treating wounds. Surgical instruments, such as scalpels, forceps, and probes, were made of bronze or iron and were often boiled in water before use. While the Romans had no knowledge of germs, this practical act of boiling would have served as a form of sterilization, significantly reducing the rates of post-operative infection. Doctors also used antiseptics like sour wine for its alcohol content and vinegar to clean wounds before dressing them with clean linen bandages. This disciplined and pragmatic approach to military hygiene and medicine gave the Roman army a significant strategic advantage. It ensured that the maximum number of soldiers remained fit for duty, reducing losses from disease and improving the recovery rates of the wounded. It was a system that recognized that the strength of a legion lay not just in its tactics and weaponry, but in the health and resilience of every single soldier.
The intellectual landscape of ancient Rome, medicine and hygiene were not separate disciplines, but deeply intertwined facets of a holistic approach to health. While the Roman understanding of disease was fundamentally flawed by our standards, lacking any concept of microbiology, their medical philosophy was built upon a rational, observational framework inherited from the Greeks. This framework, centered on the theory of the four humors and a profound belief in the influence of the environment, placed cleanliness and sanitation at the very core of preventative medicine. Roman physicians saw the care of the body, cura corporis, as the first and most critical line of defense against illness. The dominant medical theory of the era, which permeated all Roman thinking on health, was humoralism, most famously articulated by Hippocrates and later expanded upon by the influential physician Galen. This theory posited that the human body contained four fundamental substances, or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A person's health was dependent on these four humors being in perfect balance. Disease, therefore, was not caused by an external pathogen, but by an internal imbalance, an excess or deficiency of one or more of the humors. Within this paradigm, the goal of a physician was not to kill an invading organism, but to help the body restore its natural equilibrium. Cleanliness played a vital role in this preventative and restorative process. The daily bathing ritual was seen as a powerful medical treatment. The thermal journey through the baths was prescribed as a way to regulate the body's humors. The intense heat and sweating in the caldarium were believed to purge the body of excess harmful fluids. The subsequent plunge into the cold water of the frigidarium was thought to tone the body, close the pores, and restore a state of balance. Physicians would often prescribe specific bathing routines to their patients, recommending how long they should spend in each room to treat conditions ranging from lethargy, believed to be caused by an excess of phlegm, to fever.
Beyond personal bathing, Roman medical thinkers placed enormous emphasis on the connection between the environment and health. They were firm believers in the miasma theory, the idea that diseases were spread by bad air or noxious vapors emanating from swamps, stagnant water, decaying organic matter, and other unsanitary sources. The great medical writer Celsus, in his encyclopedic work De Medicina, repeatedly advises on the importance of living in a healthy location, one with good air and a clean water supply. He writes that a healthy place is open to the sky and not hot in summer nor cold in winter, and warns against the dangers of marshy country, for it generates diseases. This belief in miasma, while scientifically incorrect about the mechanism of transmission, led to remarkably effective public health policies. The construction of the great sewers like the Cloaca Maxima was not just for convenience. It was a deliberate medical strategy to remove the sources of foul-smelling, disease-causing miasmas from the city. The draining of the Roman Forum in the city's early history was as much a public health project as it was land reclamation. The magnificent aqueducts, which delivered a constant supply of fresh, clean water, were celebrated for preventing the diseases associated with drinking from stagnant or contaminated sources. The Romans were, in effect, practicing large-scale environmental medicine. By engineering a cleaner city, they were inadvertently combating the real microbial causes of disease, even if their theoretical framework was wrong. In the realm of clinical practice, particularly surgery, Roman medicine demonstrated a practical, if not theoretical, appreciation for cleanliness. Galen, who served as a physician to gladiators before becoming the court physician to several emperors, gained extensive experience in treating traumatic wounds. He wrote at length about the importance of meticulous wound care. He advocated for washing wounds with wine, a practice that, due to the alcohol content, would have had a significant antiseptic effect, reducing the risk of infection. He understood that a clean wound healed better and faster than a dirty one. He attributed this to preventing the putrefaction that could upset the body's humors, but the practical result was a form of antisepsis. Similarly, Roman surgical instruments, of which many examples have been excavated, were well made and often kept clean. The practice of boiling tools in water before a procedure, common in military medicine, shows an intuitive grasp of the benefits of sterilization. While they were not killing germs in their understanding, they were observing that cleaner tools and cleaner wounds led to better outcomes for the patient. This calm, observational, and pragmatic approach allowed Roman medicine to achieve a surprising degree of success, particularly in surgery and public health. Their legacy lies not in their flawed theories, but in their monumental and enduring commitment to creating a physical environment, both on the scale of the city and on the scale of the individual body, that was, to the very best of their knowledge, clean.
For the women of ancient Rome, particularly those of the upper classes, hygiene was an intricate and multifaceted ritual that extended far beyond the simple act of getting clean. It was a sophisticated art form known as cultus, a concept that encompassed not just cleanliness, but beauty, grooming, and the meticulous construction of a public image. A woman's cultus was a reflection of her family's status, her modesty, pudicitia, and her adherence to the shifting ideals of Roman femininity. Her daily routines, performed in the privacy of her quarters with the help of a dedicated team of slaves, were a world away from the athletic, public hygiene of men, representing a sphere of domestic luxury and detailed self-care. The day for a wealthy matrona would begin not with a simple splash of water, but with a series of elaborate treatments for the skin. While her husband might be content with a quick wash, her morning was a lengthy process orchestrated by her ornatrices, a group of female slaves who were specialists in hairdressing, cosmetics, and other arts of beauty.
The first order of business was often a facial mask. These were not mere indulgences, but were considered essential for maintaining the highly prized pale, smooth complexion that signaled a life of leisure, untouched by the sun's darkening rays. The ingredients for these masks ranged from the commonplace to the bizarre. A simple mask might be made from a paste of flour, beans, or crushed lentils mixed with milk. More luxurious and popular were masks made from ass's milk, an ingredient made famous by Poppaea Sabina, Emperor Nero's wife. She was said to have kept a herd of several hundred donkeys and to bathe in their milk daily to preserve her skin's fairness. Other recipes, recorded by writers like Ovid and Pliny, include more esoteric ingredients, such as crocodile dung, powdered stag's horn, or the placenta of a cow, all believed to have rejuvenating properties. After the mask was removed, the application of cosmetics, or medicamina, would begin. This was a delicate, layered process aimed at creating an idealized, almost doll-like visage. The foundation was a white powder to lighten the complexion, most commonly made from chalk or, more dangerously, from white lead. This lead-based makeup, known as cerussa, provided a thick, smooth, and very pale finish, but it was also a potent neurotoxin that was slowly absorbed through the skin, leading to long-term health problems and even death. On top of this white base, a touch of color was added. Red ochre, poppy petals, or the dregs of red wine were used as rouge to give a hint of a blush to the cheeks and to stain the lips. The eyes were given dramatic emphasis. Soot from a lamp, or more commonly powdered antimony, a metallic element, was used to create kohl. This dark powder was applied with a thin stick or probe made of glass, ivory, or wood. It was used to darken the eyebrows, making them appear thicker and more defined, and to line the eyes, extending the line at the corners to create a large almond-shaped appearance that was considered alluring. Hair removal was another essential component of female hygiene and beauty. Roman aesthetic ideals, as seen in their statues of goddesses like Venus, favored a smooth, hairless body. Women used a variety of methods to achieve this. Razors, novaculae, were used on the legs and underarms. Pumice stones were rubbed on the skin to braid away fine hairs. For a longer-lasting solution, women used depilatory creams known as philotra or psilotra. These were often harsh chemical concoctions containing ingredients like resin, pitch, and even arsenic sulfide, which would effectively burn the hair off at the root. Regarding menstrual hygiene, ancient texts are notoriously discreet, as it was considered a private and exclusively female concern. However, it was a fundamental reality of women's lives. Based on available evidence and parallels with other ancient cultures, Roman women would have managed menstruation using pads made from soft, folded strips of linen or wool. These would have been held in place by a belt or a form of undergarment and would have been washed and reused. This cyclical need for clean cloths would have been an unspoken but constant part of a woman's hygienic routine. Women also frequented the public baths, which were as important to their social lives as they were to men's. Most bathhouses had separate, often smaller and less grand facilities for women, or they designated specific hours of the day for female-only bathing. Here, women would follow the same cleansing ritual of oil and strigil, exercise, and immersion in the hot and cold pools. The women's baths were a crucial social space, one of the few places outside the home where women could gather freely with their peers, exchange gossip, forge friendships, and relax away from the gaze of men. The atmosphere, however, was likely more focused on beauty treatments, with women applying face masks, anointing each other with perfumed oils, and discussing the latest trends in hair and fashion. A woman's appearance upon leaving the baths was a testament to her care and status, a carefully polished presentation of the Roman female ideal.
Child hygiene and infancy. In the Roman world, where life was fragile and the shadow of infant mortality loomed large over every household, the hygiene and care of a child were matters of profound concern and gentle ritual. The survival of a newborn was not taken for granted, and the practices surrounding its early life were a blend of practical care, medical theory, and deeply ingrained tradition, all aimed at protecting the vulnerable infant and guiding it towards a healthy childhood. This world of infant care was almost exclusively the domain of women, the mother, mater, the grandmother, and in households that could afford them, the all-important wet nurse, nutrix, and her assistants. Their nurturing practices reveal a deep-seated desire to create a clean, safe, and ordered environment for the newest member of the family. The child's hygienic journey began in the very first moments after birth. The midwife, obstetrix, a respected and skilled figure in Roman society, would perform the infant's first critical ablutions. After cutting the umbilical cord, she would carefully clean the newborn. The influential 2nd century physician Soranus of Ephesus, whose work Gynecology provides our most detailed insight into Roman pediatric care, gives specific instructions for this first bath. He advises against using either very hot or very cold water, recommending a tepid temperature. He also suggests that a moderate amount of salt be sprinkled into the water, as it was believed to have a cleansing and astringent effect, helping to firm the baby's soft and porous skin. The midwife would gently wash the infant's entire body, paying special attention to clearing any residue from the eyes, ears, and mouth. This first bath was both a practical cleansing and a symbolic washing away of the impurities of the womb, preparing the child for its new life in the world. Following the bath, the next crucial step was swaddling. This was a universal practice in the Roman world, considered essential for the infant's proper development. Long, soft bands of wool were meticulously wrapped around the baby, starting from the ankles and moving up the body, securing the arms firmly to the sides. The swaddled infant resembled a small, helpless mummy. This practice was believed to serve several purposes. It kept the baby warm, a critical concern for a newborn. It was thought to protect the infant from startling itself or scratching its face. Most importantly, Romans believed that swaddling ensured that the baby's soft, pliable limbs would grow straight and strong, preventing any deformities. Soranus provides detailed diagrams and instructions for the correct method of swaddling, viewing it as a quasi-orthopedic procedure. The swaddling would be removed several times a day to allow for cleaning, and would be changed immediately if it became soiled. Daily hygiene for an infant revolved around this cycle of unswaddling and cleaning. Whenever the swaddling was removed, the nurse or mother would wash the baby, often with a damp cloth and warm water. To prevent chafing and skin irritations, which could easily become infected, they would often dust the baby's skin with fine, absorbent powders, such as powdered mallow or potter's earth. The careful management of the infant's waste was a constant task. Cloths made of soft wool or linen, the ancient equivalent of diapers, were used to absorb waste. These would be immediately removed when soiled and washed thoroughly for reuse, a constant cycle of laundering that was a hidden but essential part of infant care. As the child grew, bathing remained a central part of its daily routine. Toddlers would be bathed in small terracotta or metal tubs at home. The experience was meant to be pleasant and calming, a regular part of the day's rhythm. Once they were old enough to walk and be managed in a public space, children would often accompany their mothers or fathers to the public baths. Children were typically granted free admission to the thermae, and the great pools of the tepidarium or frigidarium would have been exciting places for play under the watchful eye of a parent or slave. Oral hygiene also started from the very beginning. Soranus advised the wet nurse to regularly clean the infant's gums even before teeth emerged. She would wrap a clean strip of linen around her finger and gently rub the baby's mouth, sometimes dipping the cloth in a soothing substance like honey or milk to ease the discomfort of teething. As children grew, they were taught the adult practices of rinsing their mouths and using a finger or a frayed stick to clean their teeth. In a world without antibiotics or an understanding of vaccination, these meticulous hygienic practices were the most potent tools a family had to protect their children from disease. The constant washing, the careful attention to cleanliness, and the ordered routines were all part of a nurturing and anxious effort to navigate the perilous journey of infancy, guided by the hope of raising a strong and healthy Roman citizen.
To step into the world of Roman hygiene is to be enveloped by a complex symphony of scents. It was a world of powerful, raw odors, the sweat of the crowd, the stench of the gutters, the smoke of countless fires. But layered over this was a deliberately crafted and luxurious world of fragrance. For the Romans, perfume was not a frivolous afterthought. It was the final, essential stage of the cleansing ritual, a fragrant seal of civilization applied to the newly purified body. Scent, or unguentum, was a marker of status, a tool of seduction, and a personal statement, transforming the act of being clean into an art form and immersing the user in a cloud of personal luxury. The Roman passion for perfume was an obsession that knew few bounds, and it was a passion shared by both men and women of the upper classes. This was not the light, alcohol-based spray we know today. Roman perfumes were rich, heavy, and oil-based, designed to cling to the skin and hair, releasing their scent slowly over many hours. The base was typically a neutral vegetable oil, such as omphacium, oil from unripe olives, almond oil, or ben oil from the moringa tree, which was prized for its lack of a natural scent and its ability to absorb and preserve fragrances. Into this base, the master perfumers, unguentarii, would infuse an astonishing array of aromatic ingredients, sourced from every corner of the sprawling empire and beyond. The perfumers' workshops, concentrated in a district of Rome known as the Vicus Unguentarius, were like alchemical laboratories. They employed various techniques to capture the essence of their ingredients. One method was enfleurage, where delicate flower petals, like those of roses or jasmine, were laid out on trays of solid fat, which would slowly absorb their scent over days. The most common method, however, was maceration. The aromatic substances, flowers, herbs, spices, or resins, were steeped in heated oil for a prolonged period, allowing their fragrant compounds to dissolve into the liquid base. The resulting oil was then strained and sold as a finished perfume. The catalog of ingredients reads like a map of Roman trade and conquest. From Italy came the prized roses of Praeneste and the lilies of Campania. From Greece and the East came saffron, cinnamon, and spikenard, a pungent root from the Himalayas. The most sought-after and astronomically expensive ingredients were the aromatic resins from the Arabian Peninsula and East Africa, frankincense, and myrrh. The rarest of all was the perfume of balsam, a resin from a shrub that grew only in Judea. The capture of Judea by Roman legions brought this scent to Rome as a spoil of war, making it the ultimate symbol of imperial power and exotic luxury. The application of perfume was a ritual in itself. After emerging from the final cold plunge at the baths, the body clean and pores open, a Roman would retire to the anointing room. Here, they would apply the unguentum liberally. It was rubbed into the skin, worked through the hair, and sometimes even applied to the soles of the feet. The goal was to be enveloped in fragrance. The truly extravagant, like the Emperor Nero, took this to theatrical extremes.
It was said that at his banquets, his dining rooms were fitted with reversible ceiling panels that could shower his guests with fresh flowers and scented water. He reportedly spent a fortune to perfume a single party with rare roses. Perfume was not limited to the body. It was used to scent homes, clothing, and even public spaces. The curtains and cushions of a wealthy Roman's home would be sprayed with fragrant water. In the theater, a fine mist of saffron-scented water was sometimes sprayed over the audience to cool them and mask the smell of the crowd. Even military triumphs, the grand parades celebrating a general's victory, were a fragrant affair. The general would ride in his chariot through streets thick with the smoke of burning incense, a scent that linked military glory with divine favor. The containers for these precious oils, the unguentaria, were also objects of beauty and status. Crafted from delicate blown glass, carved alabaster or onyx, these small flasks, known as balsamaria, were designed to protect their contents from light and air. Their elegant, elongated forms are a common find in Roman archaeological sites, a testament to the ubiquity of perfume in Roman life. To own a collection of these flasks, each filled with a different exotic scent, was a sign of immense wealth and sophistication. For the Romans, scent was inextricably linked to health, pleasure, and divinity. A pleasant fragrance was thought to ward off miasma and disease. The association with the gods was profound. The burning of incense was the primary form of communication with the divine, its fragrant smoke carrying prayers up to the heavens. To be perfumed was to be clean, to be civilized, and to be touched by a hint of the divine and the exotic. In the steam of the baths and the press of the forum, the luxurious scent of Roman perfume was a constant sensory reminder of the power, reach, and refined pleasures of the empire.
Hair care and grooming rituals. In the Roman world, hair was never just hair. It was a potent and meticulously managed symbol, a public declaration of one's identity, age, social standing, and political leanings. The grooming of hair for both men and women was a significant daily ritual, a practice that reflected the core Roman values of order, discipline, and aesthetic propriety. From the clean-shaven chin of a respectable citizen to the towering, intricate hairstyle of a high-born matrona, Roman grooming habits reveal a society deeply invested in the careful cultivation of appearance. For the Roman man, the prevailing aesthetic for much of the Republic and early Empire was one of sober, clean-cut presentation. The ideal, popularized by figures like Scipio Africanus and cemented by the first emperor, Augustus, was to be clean-shaven, with short, neatly trimmed hair. This look was a deliberate departure from the bearded philosophers of Greece and the long, wild hair of the barbarian tribes. It projected an image of a man who is disciplined, practical, and thoroughly Roman, a man of action, not of idle contemplation. Beards were associated with mourning, slovenliness, or philosophical affectation. To be clean-shaven was to be ready for business in the forum. This daily grooming was often outsourced to a professional, the tonsure. The barber shop, or tonstrina, was a fixture of every Roman neighborhood. It was far more than a place for a quick trim. It was a bustling social hub, second only to the baths as a center for neighborhood gossip, political chatter, and idle conversation. A man would recline in a chair, draped with a cloth, and submit himself to the barber's care. The haircut was done with sharp iron shears, and the shave was performed with a straight razor, the novacula, made of bronze or iron, which had to be constantly sharpened on a leather strop. The Roman shave was a delicate and often perilous operation. Lacking the comfort of modern shaving creams, the tonsure would typically moisten the face with water or apply a thin layer of olive oil to soften the beard. The skill of the barber was paramount. A steady hand was required to avoid inflicting painful nicks and cuts, a common occurrence memorialized in Roman art and literature. After the shave, the barber might apply a soothing lotion, a plaster to staunch any bleeding, or a piece of alum, a mineral astringent to calm the skin.
The first shave of a young man, the depositio barbae, was a significant rite of passage, a ceremony that marked his transition from youth to manhood, with the shavings often being consecrated to the gods. While the clean-shaven look dominated for centuries, fashion was not static. In the 2nd century AD, the emperor Hadrian, a noted Philhellene, lover of Greek culture, broke with tradition and grew a beard, reportedly to hide blemishes on his skin. This single act of imperial style setting made beards fashionable among the elite for the first time in generations, a trend that continued with his successors like Marcus Aurelius. If male grooming was about disciplined conformity, female hair care was a world of elaborate, competitive, and ever-changing artistry. For a Roman woman of status, her hairstyle, or crines, was her primary mode of fashionable expression and a direct indicator of her husband's wealth and her family's social standing. The complexity of her coiffure was a testament to a life of leisure. Only a woman with hours to spare and a dedicated staff of slaves could achieve such creations. The process was the domain of the ornatrices, a team of specialized slaves with distinct roles. One might be responsible for washing the hair using saponaceous clays or basic soaps. Another, the siniflo, was the expert in curling. Using a calamistrum, a hollow bronze or iron tube that was heated in hot ashes, she would meticulously curl small sections of hair, much like a modern curling iron. These curls then had to be arranged, braided, and pinned into place by another slave, the hairdresser proper. The styles of the Flavian period, for example, were famous for their towering beehives of curls stacked high on the front of the head, supported by wire frames and a multitude of hairpins made from bone, ivory, or bronze. The back of the hair was typically braided and coiled into an intricate bun. To achieve the volume and color demanded by fashion, wigs or couplementa and hairpieces were essential. Blonde and red hair, sourced from captive women of Gaul and Germany, were particularly prized and were used to create striking contrasts or full wigs for Roman women who desired a more exotic look. Hair could also be dyed, using substances like henna for red tones or caustic concoctions of vinegar and lead to achieve a darker shade. To complete the look, the finished hairstyle might be lightly dusted with gold powder for a shimmering effect at dinner parties, or sprinkled with scented oil to leave a fragrant trail. The elaborate hairstyles we see on the portrait busts of Roman empresses like Julia Domna or Faustina the Younger were not just artistic conventions, they were real, painstaking creations that set the trends for the entire empire. Grooming was not just a personal choice, it was a deeply ingrained ritual that communicated one's place in the Roman world with every shaven chin and every carefully placed curl.
Dental hygiene in ancient Rome. The Romans, in their quest for total body care, did not neglect the details. Their attention extended to the mouth, a gateway to the body that was also central to social interaction. A clean mouth, healthy teeth, and fresh breath were highly valued, not just for comfort, but as crucial components of one's public presentation. Bad breath, or ozana, was a significant social liability, a subject of sharp ridicule in the satirical verses of poets like Catullus and Martial, who would mercilessly mock acquaintances for their foul mouths. Consequently, the Romans developed a surprisingly diverse, if sometimes bizarre, set of practices for dental hygiene, blending practical, abrasive cleaning with folk remedies and rudimentary forms of restorative dentistry. The foundational practice of Roman dental care was mechanical cleaning. While they did not have toothbrushes with bristles, they employed two common methods. The first and simplest was the use of a finger, which could be used to rub the teeth and gums directly. The second was a dentiscalpium, a term that could refer both to a toothpick, for cleaning between teeth after a meal, and to a small frayed twig. A person would chew the end of a suitable twig until the wood fibers separated, creating a primitive brush-like implement that could be used to scrub the surfaces of the teeth. These chewing sticks, often from specific trees like the mastic tree, which had antiseptic resin, were a common tool for daily cleaning across the ancient world.
To enhance the effectiveness of this scrubbing, the Romans created a variety of tooth powders, or dentifricia. The underlying principle of these powders is identical to that of modern toothpaste, using a mild abrasive to physically remove plaque and stains. The ingredients, however, sound startling to modern ears. They were often made from a base of crushed or burnt bone, eggshells, or the powdered shells of oysters and murex snails. To this abrasive base, other ingredients could be added for flavor or for their supposed medicinal properties, such as myrrh, which has natural antiseptic qualities. Some recipes recorded by Pliny the Elder venture into the truly strange, recommending powders made from the burnt heads of mice or rabbits, or the ash of a wolf's head. While these concoctions seem rooted in magic and superstition, the abrasive nature of the ash and ground bone would have functionally effective at polishing the teeth. Beyond scrubbing, Romans were also concerned with fresh breath and the whiteness of their teeth. For this, they used mouthwashes. A simple rinse with clean water or wine was common. However, the most notorious and surprisingly effective mouthwash was stale urine. The Romans had discovered, through empirical observation, that aged urine had powerful cleansing properties. As urine decomposes, the urea within it breaks down into ammonia, a potent alkaline compound that acts as a strong bleaching agent and disinfectant. The Roman poet Catullus, in a famous poem, viciously mocks a rival named Ignatius for his unnaturally bright smile, which Catullus attributes to his habit of washing his teeth with his own Spanish urine. While the practice seems utterly repulsive today, the chemical reality is that the ammonia would have effectively whitened teeth and killed bacteria. The most prized urine for this purpose was imported from Portugal, as it was believed to be the most potent. When preventative care failed and dental problems arose, Roman medical practitioners, who were often general physicians or even skilled barbers rather than dedicated dentists, had a limited but practical set of tools and procedures. Their primary solution for a diseased or painful tooth was extraction. They possessed a variety of bronze forceps or forfex and vulsella, specifically designed for gripping and pulling teeth. Celsus, the medical writer, gives careful instructions on how to extract a tooth without fracturing it, sometimes advising to first fill a large cavity with lint or lead to reinforce the tooth structure before pulling. For the wealthy, some forms of restorative and cosmetic dentistry were available. Archaeologists have found evidence of rudimentary dental bridges, where false teeth carved from ivory or bone were held in place by being wired with gold bands to the surrounding healthy teeth. These were likely more cosmetic than functional, designed to fill an unsightly gap in a smile rather than to restore full chewing capability. There is also evidence of attempts to treat cavities, with some skulls showing teeth filled with a variety of substances. It is important to note that the typical Roman diet, which was low in refined sugar and high in coarse, abrasive grains, likely resulted in lower rates of dental caries, or cavities, than in modern populations. However, the same coarse diet, often contaminated with grit from the millstones used to grind flour, led to significant tooth wear, with the enamel often being worn down to the softer dentin layer over a lifetime. The Roman concern for their teeth, from their abrasive powders to their urine mouthwashes, reflects their broader philosophy of cura corporis, a belief that no part of the body was too small or insignificant to be cared for, cleaned, and maintained as part of a civilized life.
The fuller's trade, cleaning clothes and fabrics. While the hygiene of the Roman body was a world of fragrant oils and heated waters, the cleaning of Roman clothes was a far different affair. It was a harsh, chemical-laden, and labor-intensive industrial process, undertaken not in the serene halls of the Thermae, but in the pungent, steaming workshops of the fullo, the Roman launderer. A fullery, or fulonica, was an essential urban establishment responsible for keeping the togas of the elite a brilliant white and for finishing newly woven cloth. To peer into the world of the fuller is to get a raw, unvarnished glimpse into the practical chemistry and grueling human effort that underpinned the Roman obsession with a clean appearance. The primary challenge for a Roman launderer was the nature of the fabric itself. Most Roman garments, especially the iconic toga, were made of wool. Wool is a greasy fiber containing natural lanolin, and it readily absorbs dirt, sweat, and oil. Simple washing in water is ineffective. The Romans needed a powerful degreasing agent, a detergent, and they found the perfect, if unpleasant one, in a substance that was abundant and free: stale human urine. The fullers of a Roman city would place large clay pots or dolia on street corners, inviting male passerby to contribute. The collected urine was then aged in vats at the foolery. This aging process was critical. Over several days, bacteria would break down the urea in the urine, converting it into ammonia. Ammonia is a powerful alkaline solution, an excellent surfactant that is highly effective at breaking down grease and fats, making it the perfect chemical tool for scouring dirty woolen cloth. The cleaning process at a typical foolery, like the remarkably well-preserved ones found in Pompeii, was a multi-stage production line. The first stage involved washing the dirty garments. The clothes were placed in a series of small, stone-lined tubs or vats. These tubs were then filled with a mixture of water and the aged ammoniated urine. Sometimes a type of alkaline clay known as fuller's earth was added to the mixture. This clay, rich in minerals like montmorillonite, acted as both an abrasive and an absorbent, helping to draw out impurities from the fibers. Then came the human washing machines. This was the most grueling part of the process. Slaves or low-paid workers, known as fulones, would get into the tubs and stomp on the clothes for hours on end. Their bare feet would tread, pound, and twist the heavy, water and urine-soaked garments against the abrasive floor of the tub. This relentless mechanical action, combined with the chemical power of the ammonia, worked the dirt, grease, and sweat out of the thick woolen fibers. It was back-breaking, foul-smelling work performed in a humid, steamy environment. After the stomping was complete, the garments, now laden with a slurry of dirt and cleaning agents, were moved to the rinsing stage. The workshops were equipped with a large, interconnected basins fed by a constant supply of clean water from the city's aqueducts. The clothes were rinsed repeatedly in these basins to remove every last trace of the urine, fuller's earth, and loosened grime. For garments that needed to be whitened, particularly the togas that were the symbol of Roman citizenship, there was an additional step: bleaching. The damp, clean garment would be stretched over a large dome-shaped wicker frame called a viminia caviaia. Underneath this frame, a pot of burning sulfur would be placed. The sulfur dioxide fumes produced by the fire would rise and envelop the cloth. The gas acted as a powerful bleaching agent, whitening the wool to the brilliant, chalky shade so prized by the Roman elite. This process also had the secondary benefit of disinfecting the fabric. Finally, the cloth entered the finishing stages. It was hung on racks in an open-air courtyard to dry. Once dry, the surface of the wool, which would be matted and rough from the harsh washing process, had to be carded. This was done using specialized brushes, sometimes made from the spiny skin of a hedgehog or with thistle plants, to gently tease out the fibers and raise the nap, restoring the cloth's soft texture. The last step for a high-quality garment was pressing. The cloth was placed in a large, heavy screw press, which would flatten it, remove all creases, and give it a smooth, polished finish. The fuller's trade was a vital, if malodorous, part of the Roman urban economy. Fullers were organized into powerful trade guilds, and their workshops were sophisticated, if pungent, chemical factories. They were the unsung custodians of Roman public image, the men who, through a combination of chemistry, hard labor, and a remarkable tolerance for foul smells, ensured that the citizens of Rome could present themselves in brilliantly clean attire.
Public fountains and water supply. If the aqueducts were the great arteries carrying lifeblood into Rome, then the public fountains were the capillaries, the points of final distribution where the state's monumental engineering effort met the daily domestic needs of the ordinary citizen.
The fountain, or locus, was arguably the most democratic and essential component of the entire Roman water system. For the vast majority of the city's population, who lived in apartments without any form of private plumbing, the neighborhood fountain was their sole source of fresh water for drinking, cooking, and washing. These ubiquitous, constantly flowing water sources were the bedrock of urban hygiene and a powerful daily testament to the emperor's benevolence and the civic mindedness of the Roman state. The distribution of water from the main reservoirs, castella, was a matter of deliberate public policy. The great Roman architect and engineer, Vitruvius, writing in the age of Augustus, laid out the ideal hierarchy for water allocation. He stipulated that the network of pipes leaving a castellum should be divided into 3 groups. The first and highest priority group of pipes was to supply the public fountains. This ensured that, even in times of drought when the aqueduct's flow might be reduced, the general populace would be the last to lose access to water. The second priority was the supply for the great public baths, and the third and lowest priority was the supply for private customers, the wealthy individuals who paid a water tax for a direct connection to their homes. This fountains first policy demonstrates a clear and sophisticated understanding of public health and civic responsibility. The basic needs of the many were explicitly placed before the luxuries of the few. As a result of this policy, fountains were everywhere in Rome. It is estimated that by the 4th century AD, the city boasted over 1,300 public fountains. They were strategically placed at crossroads, in public squares, fora, and nestled into the dense residential quarters of the city. No inhabitant of Rome was ever more than a short walk, perhaps 50 meters at most, from a source of fresh, clean, running water. This easy and free access to potable water was a defining feature of Roman urbanism and a stark contrast to the conditions in many other ancient and medieval cities. A typical Roman fountain was not the grand sculptural masterpiece of the later Renaissance or Baroque periods. It was a sturdy, functional, and robustly built structure designed for heavy daily use. Most consisted of a simple rectangular or circular basin made of stone or lined with waterproof concrete. Water would pour into the basin from a spout, which was often a simple lead pipe, or in more decorative examples, a bronze or stone carving of a lion's head, a theatrical mask, or a mythological figure. A critical feature of the Roman system was that the water was always running. The Romans did not invent or widely use stopcocks or taps to turn the flow on and off at these public points. The water from the spout flowed continuously 24 hours a day. This constant movement had 2 significant benefits. It kept the water fresh and aerated, and the constant overflow, which was directed into a drain connected to the sewer system, effectively made the fountains self-cleaning, washing away any debris that might fall into the basin. The fountain was a natural hub of neighborhood life. Throughout the day, it was a scene of constant activity. Slaves, women, and children would arrive with earthenware jars, wooden buckets, or leather water skins to be filled. The task of hauling water was a fundamental and repetitive domestic chore, a crucial part of the daily rhythm. The fountain was a place of social interaction, a microforum where neighbors would meet, exchange news, catch up on gossip, and complain about their landlords while waiting their turn. It was a noisy, bustling, and vital point of social connection. The provision of these fountains was a significant source of political capital. When an emperor or a wealthy magistrate funded the construction of a new aqueduct or the repair of an old one, the ultimate visible result for the people was the gushing of a new fountain. Inscriptions were often placed on fountains, dedicating them to the emperor or benefactor responsible, a constant and visible reminder of their generosity. This may be abstract concept of imperial power and benevolence tangible to every citizen every time they filled a jug with water. The vast network of public fountains was the lifeblood of the city, an engineering marvel that underpinned public health, facilitated domestic hygiene, and reinforced the social and political contract between the Roman state and its people. Hygiene and religion, ritual purification. In the spiritual consciousness of the Roman people, the line between physical cleanliness and religious purity was not merely thin, it was often non-existent. Water, the great agent of hygiene, was also endowed with a profound sacred power. The act of washing was rarely just about removing dirt. It was a resonant, symbolic gesture, a means of achieving a state of ritual purity, or puritas, that was essential for proper communion with the gods. This deep-seated connection between hygiene and religion permeated Roman life, from the grandest state ceremonies designed to cleanse the entire city to the most intimate and personal rituals performed at the household shrine. The clean body was a vessel fit for divine interaction, and the act of purification was a constant, meditative practice that ordered the Romans' relationship with the sacred world. Central to this belief system was the concept of lustratio, a formal ceremony of ritual purification. A lustratio was performed to wash away a spiritual stain or contamination, a state of religious pollution known as piaculum. Such a state could be incurred through a variety of events that disrupted the natural order, such as coming into contact with a corpse, witnessing a birth, or being present at a place struck by lightning. This pollution was not seen as a sin in the modern sense, but as a kind of spiritual imbalance that rendered an individual, an army, or even an entire city unfit to engage with the divine. The remedy was almost always a ritual involving water. A priest, using a sprinkler made from a branch of laurel or olive, and aspergillum, would sprinkle the afflicted person or object with consecrated water, symbolically washing away the contamination and restoring a state of ritual purity. This was essential before any major undertaking, such as a general leading his army into battle, or farmers beginning their planting. The army or the fields would first have to be purified to ensure the favor of the gods. This principle of entering a sacred space in a state of purity was a fundamental rule of Roman worship. Every temple precinct had, near its entrance, a basin of holy water called a periranthrion. Worshippers were expected to stop and wash their hands and face before proceeding further. This was a physical act with a deep spiritual meaning. It was a gesture of respect, a conscious shedding of the dirt and distractions of the profane, secular world before stepping onto the hallowed ground of the gods. To enter a temple with unwashed hands was an act of profound disrespect, an offense that could anger the resident deity. This simple act of ablution marked a clear transition from the mundane to the sacred. The connection between cleanliness and piety extended into the heart of the Roman home, the domus. Every household had a lararium, a small shrine dedicated to the household gods, the lares, who protected the family, and the penates, who guarded the pantry. Daily rituals were performed at this shrine, typically by the paterfamilias, the head of the household. Before he approached the lararium to make his offerings of food and wine and to recite his prayers, he was expected to have washed his hands. This gesture mirrored the practice at public temples, affirming that his own home was a sacred space, and that communication with his ancestral protectors required the same level of respect and purity. Even the great public baths, for all their secular, social, and hedonistic aspects, never fully shed this ancient sacred association with water. The very act of bathing, of moving through the cleansing heat and the purifying cold, was seen as a restorative process for both body and soul. It was a ritual of renewal that washed away the fatigue and corruption of daily life, restoring the individual to a state of wholeness and integrity. The architectural grandeur of the thermae, with their soaring vaulted ceilings, their statue-filled halls, and their temple-like scale, intentionally elevated the act of bathing. It transformed a daily hygienic habit into a quasi-religious experience, a celebration of the life-giving and purifying power of water, which the Romans saw as a gift from the gods, delivered by the genius of man. This religious dimension of washing was not confined to traditional Roman paganism. As new religions and mystery cults flowed into Rome from the eastern provinces, They often brought with them their own rituals of water purification. The cult of the Egyptian goddess Isis, which became immensely popular in Rome, involved elaborate ceremonies of purification with water from the Nile. The rites of Mithraism, a cult popular with soldiers, also included forms of ritual washing. This widespread use of water for spiritual cleansing across different faiths created a fertile ground for the concepts that would later be central to Christianity. The Christian rite of baptism, a full immersion in water to wash away original sin and signify spiritual rebirth, emerged from a cultural context where the link between water, cleansing, and spiritual renewal was already a deeply understood and widely practiced concept. For the Romans, washing was never a simple matter. It was a profound act that cleaned the skin and aimed to purify the soul.
Disease, epidemics, and public health practices. The Roman world presents a striking paradox in the history of public health. It was a civilization that achieved unprecedented feats of sanitary engineering, creating cities with clean water, public baths, and sewer systems, yet it was also a world periodically devastated by catastrophic epidemics that swept through the population with terrifying speed and lethality. The Roman experience with disease reveals the profound and tragic limitations of even the most advanced infrastructure when it is not guided by a correct scientific understanding of contagion. Their attempts to combat plagues highlight a fascinating and often frustrating tension between their practical, engineering-minded approach to health and their theoretical framework, which ultimately left them vulnerable to the invisible world of microbes. The great plagues of the Roman Empire, such as the Antonine Plague that raged from 165 to 180 AD and the Plague of Cyprian in the mid-3rd century, were society-altering events. These pandemics, now thought by historians to have been outbreaks of smallpox and measles respectively, killed millions of people, perhaps wiping out as much as a quarter to a third of the empire's population. They crippled the economy, decimated the army, and contributed to the political instability of the crisis of the 3rd century. The Roman response to these crises was a mixture of rational observation, flawed medical theory, and desperate religious appeals. The dominant Roman theory of disease transmission was the miasma theory. Physicians and laypeople alike believed that epidemics were caused by bad air, a poisonous pestilential vapor, or miasma, that rose from swamps, decaying corpses, sewage, and other sources of filth. This theory, while not incorrect about the mechanism, was not entirely without benefit. It provided a powerful rationale for the very public works that are the hallmark of Roman sanitation. Draining marshlands, such as the early project that created the Roman Forum, was seen as a crucial measure to eliminate the source of malarial miasmas. The great sewers were celebrated not just for removing waste, but for carrying away the foul-smelling sources of disease. The emphasis on a constant flow of fresh air in buildings, as advocated by the architect Vitruvius, was also rooted in the desire to disperse these noxious vapors. In this sense, the Roman fight against bad smells inadvertently led them to combat some of the environmental conditions, like stagnant water that breeds mosquitoes, that foster real diseases like malaria. However, the miasma theory also created a critical blind spot. Since the perceived enemy was bad air, the Romans had no concept of person-to-person transmission, or the role of contaminated objects and water in spreading disease. This meant that some of their most cherished hygienic institutions may have ironically become centers for contagion. The great public baths, the pride of Roman cities, were warm, humid environments where thousands of people congregated in close contact. The water in the pools was heated but not disinfected. It would have quickly become a breeding ground for a host of bacteria and viruses. While a bather might feel clean after their ritual, they could easily leave carrying a new infection picked up from a fellow citizen. The shared strigils and towels, if not properly cleaned, could also transmit skin infections. Even more dangerous were the public latrines. The infamous xylospongium, the communal sponge on a stick, was a horrifyingly effective tool for spreading gastrointestinal diseases. By passing the sponge from person to person with only a cursory rinse in water, the Romans were ensuring the efficient transmission of the pathogens that caused dysentery, cholera, typhoid, and parasitic worm infections. Scientific analysis of dried fecal matter from ancient Roman sewers, particularly from Herculaneum, has confirmed the widespread presence of parasites like whipworm and roundworm among the population. The Romans' impressive system for washing waste away was rendered less effective by their failure to understand the invisible threat that lingered on their cleaning implements. When a major epidemic erupted, Roman society struggled to respond effectively. Physicians like Galen, who personally witnessed the Antonine Plague, provided detailed clinical descriptions of its symptoms, but their treatments, based on balancing the body's humors through bloodletting or prescribing specific diets, were useless against a viral outbreak. With medicine failing, many turned to religion. The state would organize massive public ceremonies, processions, and animal sacrifices to appease the gods, who were believed to have sent the plague as a punishment. People were encouraged to burn incense to purify the air. Oracles were consulted, and foreign cults that promised protection were embraced. The public response was often one of panic. Those who could fled the densely populated cities, a rational instinct that unfortunately had the effect of spreading the disease along the Roman road network into the countryside and to other towns. The sheer number of dead became a logistical crisis, overwhelming the normal systems for burial and cremation. The Roman experience serves as a powerful and somber lesson in public health. Infrastructure alone is not enough. Without a scientific understanding of germ theory, even the cleanest appearing society can be left defenseless against the invisible enemies that lurk in the water, on shared objects, and in the very air people breathe.
Hygiene in Roman provinces and the countryside. The gleaming image of Roman hygiene, with its colossal bathhouses and intricate sewer systems, is overwhelmingly an image of the city of Rome itself. But Rome was merely the heart of a vast and diverse empire that stretched from the misty hills of Britain to the sun-scorched sands of Egypt. To truly understand hygiene in the Roman world, we must travel beyond the capital and explore how the Roman model of cleanliness was adopted, adapted, and sometimes ignored in the sprawling provinces and the vast rural landscapes where the vast majority of the empire's population lived. This journey reveals a complex tapestry of hygienic practices, a spectrum that ranged from perfect replicas of Roman urban life to the simple, practical realities of agricultural existence. In the major provincial cities, the Roman culture of hygiene was often adopted with enthusiastic thoroughness. Cities like Ephesus in modern-day Turkey, Leptis Magna in Libya, Timgad in Algeria, or Augusta Treverorum, Trier in Germany, became vibrant centers of Roman life, and a key way they expressed their Roman identity was by building the infrastructure of cleanliness. Wealthy local elites, eager to demonstrate their sophistication and loyalty to Rome, would fund the construction of aqueducts, fountains, latrines, and most importantly, public baths. These provincial thermae might not have rivaled the sheer scale of the baths of Caracalla, but they were often magnificent structures in their own right, built with local stone and materials, but following the classic Roman architectural blueprint. Walking through the ruins of a city like Timgad, a military colony in North Africa founded by Trajan, is a striking experience. The city is laid out on a perfect grid, and among its forum, theater, and library are the remains of no fewer than 14 public bathhouses. This demonstrates that the daily bathing ritual was not just a habit for the people of Rome, but had become an essential exportable feature of Roman urban culture, a key part of what it meant to live in a Roman city anywhere in the empire. The practices were the same. Citizens would exercise in the palastra, cleanse themselves with oil and strigil, and progress through the heated rooms and cold pools. This shared cultural ritual created a common cultural language that connected a merchant in Gaul with a bureaucrat in Syria. However,
Roman hygienic models were also adapted to local conditions and climates. In the hot and arid provinces of North Africa and the Middle East, water was an even more precious commodity. The aqueducts and cisterns built in these regions were marvels of water conservation engineering. The bathhouses here were central to social life, providing a cool and pleasant escape from the oppressive daytime heat. In the cooler, wetter climate of Britain, the hypocaust heating systems of the bathhouses were a particularly welcome luxury. The bathhouse at Bath, Aquae Sulis, was built around a natural hot spring, brilliantly merging a local sacred site with Roman bathing technology to create a unique spa and healing center that attracted visitors from all over the province. As one moved away from these urbanized provincial centers, the picture changed dramatically. The Roman Empire was overwhelmingly agricultural, and for the farmers, peasants, and slaves who worked the land, the luxurious daily bathing ritual was an alien concept. In the countryside, hygiene was dictated by practicality, tradition, and the local environment. A rural family's water source was not a grand aqueduct, but a simple well, a nearby stream, or a cistern for collecting rainwater. A full body wash was an infrequent event, perhaps a weekly affair in a wooden tub filled with heated water, or a seasonal swim in a river or lake. Toilets were not flushing latrines, but simple pit privies dug in the ground at a distance from the dwelling. Yet even in the heart of the countryside, the influence of Roman elite culture could be found. The owner of a large agricultural estate, a latifundium, would often build a lavish country villa for himself and his family. These villas were oases of urban luxury in a rustic setting. A key feature of almost every grand villa was a private bath suite, a scaled-down version of the city thermae, complete with its own small furnace, hypocaust system, and mosaic-decorated pools. This was a powerful symbol of the owner's status and wealth, a way of bringing the refined comforts of Roman civilization to his rural domain. For the hundreds of slaves and tenant farmers who worked his land, however, such facilities were utterly inaccessible. Their lives were governed by the rhythms of the seasons and the demands of their labor, and their hygienic practices remained simple and functional. This stark contrast between the city and the country, and between the elite and the laboring classes, defines the reality of hygiene across the Roman Empire. It was not a monolithic, uniform practice, but a complex mosaic. It ranged from the daily, social, and water-intensive bathing of the urbanite to the basic functional washing of the farmer. The Roman model of hygiene spread far and wide, but its full expression was largely a privilege of city life and of wealth.
The decline of Roman hygiene after the empire's fall does not end with a sudden, dramatic collapse. Instead, it fades away in a long, slow, and somber twilight. The decline and eventual disappearance of the Roman bathing culture and its supporting infrastructure was a direct consequence of the fragmentation of the Western Roman Empire, a casualty of centuries of economic decay, political instability, and relentless warfare. The magnificent systems that had kept Roman cities clean and healthy were complex and fragile ecosystems, and as the centralized power that built and maintained them withered, they inevitably began to fail. The aqueducts were the first and most critical point of failure. These monumental arteries of stone and mortar were the lifelines of Roman urban hygiene, but they were immensely expensive to maintain. They required constant inspection and repair by skilled engineers and laborers. As the empire's tax base eroded and its territories were ravaged by civil wars and barbarian invasions, the funds and the centralized authority needed for this upkeep vanished. The aqueducts were also highly vulnerable to deliberate attack. During the Gothic War in the 6th century, the Ostrogoths besieging Rome made the strategic decision to cut all the aqueducts supplying the city. This single act was a catastrophic blow. The once mighty flow of water that had supplied the baths, fountains, and sewers for centuries was reduced to a trickle and then stopped altogether. The great thermae could no longer be filled, their furnaces falling cold and silent. What happened to these vast, now useless structures is a poignant epilogue to the story of Roman grandeur. They were too large to be ignored.
Some were stripped of their precious materials, their marble cladding pried off for new churches, their lead pipes melted down for other uses, their bronze statues melted for coin or weapons. Others were repurposed. Their massive, thick walls made them ideal defensive structures, and sections of the baths of Caracalla were converted into fortifications. In other places, their cavernous halls became the homes of squatters, or were filled with earth and turned into vegetable gardens. Many simply fell into ruin, their immense vaulted ceilings, once feats of engineering, collapsing under their own weight, their beautiful mosaic floors gradually buried under layers of debris and soil, waiting centuries to be rediscovered. With the aqueducts severed and the baths abandoned, the daily life of the urban population was irrevocably altered. The social ritual of the daily public bath, which had been a cornerstone of Roman identity for over 500 years, ceased to exist. People reverted to more basic and private forms of washing, using water drawn from the polluted Tiber River or from newly dug wells. The intricate sewer systems, deprived of the constant flow of water from the baths and fountains that had flushed them clean, became clogged and fell into disuse. Waste was once again disposed of in cesspits or simply thrown into the streets. The cities of post-Roman Europe became, by and large, less sanitary places, and the sophisticated relationship with water that had defined the Roman era was lost. This material decay was accompanied by a profound cultural and ideological shift. The rise of Christianity as the dominant religion of the late and post-Roman world brought with it a new set of values regarding the body, nudity, and public life. Early Christian leaders and ascetics often viewed the old Roman baths with deep suspicion. They saw them as symbols of pagan decadence, places of moral laxity, luxury, and promiscuous public nakedness. While Christianity did not preach against cleanliness itself, ritual washing remained important in rites like baptism. It rejected the hedonistic, social, and spectacular bathing culture of the Romans. The focus shifted from the elaborate care and celebration of the physical body to the salvation and purification of the immortal soul. The new ideal was often one of asceticism and modesty, a stark contrast to the leisurely, self-indulgent world of the Thermae. The decline of Roman hygiene, therefore, was a multifaceted process. It was a technological collapse, as the infrastructure fell into disrepair. It was a social collapse, as the central institution of community life vanished. And it was a cultural collapse, as new religious and social ideals took hold. The knowledge of hydraulic engineering was not entirely lost, but the political will and economic resources to implement it on a Roman scale disappeared for 1,000 years. The silent, colossal ruins of the great baths that are scattered across Europe and the Mediterranean are not just tourist attractions. They are somber monuments to a lost world, a world where the daily pleasure of a hot bath was a right of citizenship, a world that became, for a very long time, a much less clean and much less communal place. Lessons from Roman hygiene for today. As we emerge from the steam-filled halls, gritty sewer tunnels, and fragrant anointing rooms of the Roman world, it is tempting to view their hygienic practices through a simple lens of progress. We have germ theory, antibiotics, and instant hot water. They had shared toilet sponges and lead pipes. Yet, to conclude our journey here would be to miss the profound and surprisingly relevant lessons that Roman hygiene holds for the 21st century. Looking past the superficial differences, the Roman experience offers a powerful and enduring reflection on the intricate relationship between infrastructure, community, public health, and the very definition of a good life. The first and most striking lesson is a resounding affirmation of the power of public investment in infrastructure. The Romans understood with absolute clarity that the health, prosperity, and stability of their society were directly tied to large-scale, long-term civic projects. The aqueducts, sewers, and public baths were not considered discretionary expenses or luxuries. They were seen as fundamental responsibilities of the state, as essential to the well-being of the populace as the army or the grain supply. They invested a staggering amount of their collective wealth and engineering genius into systems designed to benefit everyone.
This stands as a powerful counter-narrative to modern tendencies to privatize essential services or to delay necessary infrastructural maintenance due to short-term budget concerns. The Romans remind us that a society's greatness can be measured by its commitment to the public good, and that investing in the systems that provide a clean water and sanitation yields incalculable returns in public health and civic pride. Secondly, the Romans offer a compelling model for the integration of health and community. Our modern approach to hygiene is overwhelmingly private, clinical, and efficient. A quick shower in a sealed bathroom, a solitary act. For the Romans, hygiene was fundamentally social. The thermae were not just places to get clean, they were the vibrant, beating hearts of their communities. They were centers for exercise, social networking, business, intellectual debate, and simple relaxation. The Romans instinctively understood that physical well-being cannot be separated from social and mental well-being. In an age where we face growing concerns about social isolation and a lack of third places, communal spaces outside of home and work, the Roman bathhouse stands as an extraordinary historical example of an institution that simultaneously catered to the health of the individual and the cohesion of the community. It challenges us to think more creatively about how our public spaces can be designed to foster both health and human connection. However, the Roman story is not one of unqualified success. It also serves as a crucial and humbling cautionary tale about the dangers of technological prowess without complete scientific understanding. The Romans were masters of macro-engineering, but ignorant of microbiology. This led to the great paradox of their system. Their magnificent baths and latrines, designed to promote cleanliness, simultaneously became highly efficient vectors for the spread of infectious diseases. Their story is a stark reminder that even the most advanced societies can have profound blind spots. It compels us to ask ourselves, what are our modern blind spots? What universally accepted practices of today, from our industrial food systems to our reliance on certain chemicals, will future generations look back upon with the same mixture of awe and horror that we feel when contemplating the xylospongium? The Romans teach us that humility and a willingness to question our own assumptions are essential for true, sustainable progress. Ultimately, to study Roman hygiene is to hold a mirror up to ourselves. We see a society grappling with the same fundamental challenges we face: how to manage waste, how to prevent disease, how to build community, and how to care for our bodies. Their solutions were forged from a different set of tools and a different understanding of the world, but their underlying aspirations are deeply familiar. They remind us that hygiene is never just about health. It is about culture, values, and the kind of society we wish to create. The enduring legacy of Roman hygiene is not found in the ruins of their baths, but in the enduring questions they pose. Do we see public health as a collective responsibility? Do we value and invest in communal spaces? And are we prepared to recognize and address the hidden vulnerabilities within our own sophisticated systems? The Romans, across 2 millennia, are still holding the conversation. We would be wise to listen.